Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome everyone to Mid-Suffolk District Council Development Control Committee A. Just need to run through some of the domestic arrangements before we make a start. Can you please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use? And can I ask members, please, and members of the public not to interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations when people are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt, you may be asked to leave the meeting. Can I ask everyone just to get their mobile phones out and double check they are switched off or on silent, please. And can I also ask you to do the same with your computers, just to make sure the volume's turned down to stop them pinging when the emails come in. We will be using e-voting for this meeting as usual, which is on modern.gov app. So please could I just ask members to remind you to stay logged into that so we can use the app during the meeting. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except when there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you do hear the fire alarm today, please leave the building immediately via the fire exits and make your ways to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Club. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor, and please do not enter the atrium building, which is the ground floor area and walkways. If you're in the atrium when the alarm sounds, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Please do not use the lifts and use the stairs, and do not re-enter the building till it's told it is safe to do so. Okay, so just a few introductions. Actually, we haven't got any members of the public, but anyone that might be watching online. In Mid-Suffolk District Council, the decision today will be made by the councillors here on my left and myself. At Mid-Suffolk, however, you cannot vote on an application in your own ward, and we also have ward members who have the opportunity to speak on applications as well within their ward. Okay, I think we'll go straight in to the first item on the agenda. I'll do some quick introductions, actually, because there's some faces here that not everyone may be familiar. First of all, down the end we have Philip Isbell, who's the Chief Planning Officer. We have, next to that, Catherine Davies, who's the Sustainable Travel Officer. Then we have Ben Chester from Highways. And then we have Bradley Heffer, who's presenting, and Ian Duprez, who's our legal advisor. On my right, we know Claire Philpott. On my left, we have Alicia Norman and Beth Webb, who keep the meeting ticking over for us and make sure everything runs smoothly. So we'll go straight into apologies for absence. Do we have any, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for Councillor Eburn, Councillor Field, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Matheson and Councillor Passmore. Councillor Wellham is substituting for Councillor Eburn. Councillor Warboys is substituting for Councillor Matheson. Councillor Morley is substituting for Councillor Passmore, and Councillor Heston is substituting for Councillor Humphreys. Thank you. So we're one member short. Thank you.
Okay. Pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Yes, Councillor Wellham.
I am the County Councillor for Stowmarket North, which includes these two sites. I think that's all I have to declare.
Thank you very much. No one else? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Any declarations of lobbying? Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied by various people in respect of both applications over a long period of time.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of personal site visits? Councillor Mayor?
I'm not a site vet per se, but I do use the B113 on a very regular basis.
I walk that way, and I cycle that way, and I drive that way, so I'm very familiar with both of these sites. and have on occasion had cause to walk into the sites, to the allotments or up the track. So over a period of time, yes, I have visited the sites.
Thank you very much. Okay, on the confirmation of minutes, as more than half of the committee is substituted, I've decided to move the minutes to the next meeting because I think it's unfair for so many people not to have a say on them. So they'll come to the next meeting. Because it's very rare for us to have so many substitutions, but obviously this isn't on a normal day for the meeting, so that's probably why. Okay, do we need to receive any notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme?
None received, Chair.
Okay, so we'll into the first of the two applications before us today, which is DC 20-01036 Ashes Farm in Newton Road, Stowmarket, and I'll now hand over to the Case Officer Bradley Heffer to introduce the application to us.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. This application has previously been to committee for consideration on the 20th of July this year. It's an outline application for 300 units. I'll run through the presentation again just to refresh everyone's memory, and then following on from that, we'll look at the specific reasons for deferral at the last meeting, which you'll know there were 4 reasons, or 4 issues that members wanted some more information on or more consideration of, and I'll deal with those at the end of the presentation. So as I say, it's an outline application for 300 units on site Ashes Farm, Newton Road. The application is in outline except for the access. The main means vehicular access. Full planning permission is being sought at this stage. This is a wider aerial view which shows the site in relation to the town, Stowmarket to the south, and Stow Upland to the north-east. The other elements I would point out on this drawing, on this plan, are the line of the A14 trunk road, which runs along the top of this site. This is an aerial map. This shows the extent of the site again. You will note it's bisected by Newton Road. And also there's an area of land to the right-hand side, which is the subject of the next item of the agenda, and that's known as Diapers Farm. This is a red line application drawing site plan. The thing I think is relevant to point out on this particular plan is the fact that the allotment site is edged blue, which means it's under the ownership or control of the applicant, but it doesn't form part of the planning application. The constraints map, you'll notice a lot of blue on the site, as a substantial amount of this part of the application site is within a flood zone. The remaining area is outside. The other elements I would point out on this drawing are the settlement boundary, which is shown there edged brown. Again, you've got the road across the top, and you've also got footpaths that cross the site, both this one and the adjacent site, Diapers Farm. And you'll also note in the vicinity there are some Grade 2 listed buildings, namely the farmhouse itself, and some others which are closer to the Diapers Farm development. This extract is taken from the Council's development brief, which was produced subsequent to the Stowmarket Area Action Plan. The area we're talking about under this particular application is Zone 1. That covers this area of land and the site on the opposite side of Newton Road. The difference with the Ashes Farm application you're considering now is that the land here is also included, this open area of land here is included within the application site. This is the concept plan that is also in the Council's development brief. To point out in relation to considerations later on, you'll notice that there's an area of open space towards the northeastern part of the site, lower density development through the middle, higher density development and more open space. Well, that's the allotments, but more open space left to this particular boundary, and then you've got the area of open space on the opposite side, and the arrow there is an indication of the point of access through the site. The other dotted line that's worth pointing out at this stage is the line of a spine road link between the two, again shown as part of a concept rather than a specific detail. This is the illustrative master plan that's submitted as part of the planning application, which follows, if I go back to that one and then quickly go to this one, it follows, in our view, the general themes that are drawn out in the concept plan insofar as the arrangement of spaces on the site, insofar as you have the area of open space at the top. The lighter brown colour you can see there is an area of less dense development, and then the darker area is the area of what would be more dense development, and then areas of open space on this side. And again, these two sites here being used or utilised as open space. As part of the proposals you expect, there's, because of the scale of the development, there's a need to provide highway improvements. As I said at the start, the application itself does seek full planning permission for the vehicular means of access, which is up here. And there's various works proposed along Newton Road, which I'll go into more detail in the subsequent slides. Firstly, starting with the main point of access for vehicles. This is a priority junction, as you can see, and it's got, as part of the design, a footway coming out of the site, which goes on to Newton Road, then a crossing point, which carries on to a footway on this side of the site. There has been changes to this plan or this proposal, but I'll go into more detail on those further in the presentation. This is, if you can remember that crossing point which was about there, this is the remainder of that path which comes down through the area of open land which forms part of the application site, and then crosses over and then continues down and then goes back onto Newton Road to join up with the existing provision here. The plan that shown, this work shows the proposal to regularise, if that's the right word, the parking provision that's adjacent to the allotment spaces. You'll see there's a line of car parking along the side of the road there, which is proposed, and that's a total of 18 spaces that are proposed to be done. And also there's a link, a footpath link adjacent to this junction, which it's proposed to widen. This isn't a plan, or this is a plan you haven't seen before. This is a connectivity plan, and this was produced as a result of the deferral. You'll note that it's a joint plan produced by the applicants for this application and the applicants for the Diapers farm proposal. And this is to demonstrate connectivity, bearing in mind that the proposal on Diapers farm is a full application, which we'll be talking about later on, and this is an outline application. So everything you see on this drawing, apart from the means of access, is in outline, but I think the key point to note, even at this stage, is that there is agreement to provide the connectivity between the two insofar as the Spine Road link between Stow Upland Road and Newton Road. And also there's an indication on that drawing of a shared cycle footway also following that route, which is the light green line you can see following through there, and also the continuation of footpath links having the same treatment through both sites along the boundary there, and the maintenance obviously of the footpath links that are shown. The other thing that is shown on this is the link through to Stow Upland Road at the bottom using the existing line, the prow at that point, so there'd be a link through the site up to there, which would still be respected as part of the public right-of-way network. Sorry, if I go back to that, the other thing which I'll talk about again, but I will show you because the plan is up, is that whereas under the previous iteration of this, of the drawings for Ashes Farm, there was a footpath proposal that was going to link from here down through the open space and back onto Newton Road. The applicants for the Ashes Farm proposal have agreed that this would now take the form of a shared footway cycleway from that point to that point there. So that's a change that's happened since the consideration of the planning application originally. Some photographs of the surrounding site. This is the approach to the site from the north. You see the bridge containing the A14 along Newton Road. This is the approach leading up to the site entrance and the approximate position of the site entrance itself. That's one of the areas of open space which would remain as is. That's one of the areas that's also covered by the flood zone constraint which I spoke about earlier. That's another shot. This is the access where a Newton Road and Spring Row join, and the footpath that is now proposed to be a footway cycleway will come along the back and join across here into a new provision at this point. So that's the change at that junction. That's a view from the main road up to, or looking along Spring Row. And as I said previously, with the introduction of the footway cycleway along this point, that would allow cyclists to continue down this route into town, which would avoid the use of the Newton Road, Stow Upland Road junction at the bottom, which, as members are aware, is a well-used and quite an unfriendly environment for cyclists. So in terms of an alternative route, that would offer an alternative as far as officers are concerned. That's looking at the up towards the site access. One of the elements that would be required as part of this would be an extension of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that those two signs there, which are the de-restriction signs, would be moved further north towards the bridge. That's a shot of the farmhouse, which is listed itself, and again looking down the road. This is the narrower part of Newton Road as you approach or get nearer to the town, which I've mentioned before, with the existing footpath provision. And that's the edge of the allotments, and you can see along there the existing parking provision, and that would be remodelled as part of the proposals. One element that was mentioned at the last meeting was the status and use of this lane here. This is private. At the last meeting I advised that that is within the red line, and that was wrong. That was incorrect, and apologies for the misinformation. The red line actually ends at this point here, so the applicant has no ownership or control of that access, just to clarify that particular point. This is views across the site itself, taken a while ago, but clearly you can see it's agricultural, former agricultural land that was fallow at the time I took those photographs. One of the notable things in topographically is the fall that you get, which is roughly from the north to south, although it's a bit more nuanced than that. So the highest part of the site is towards the trunk road, which will be along the top of the boundary there. There's further views. This is the this is the junction Newton Road, Stow Upland Road, and as part of the proposals, this is the widened area of pathway which would be improved. And as I say, in terms of the alternative means of, or the alternative shared cycle route, that would at least encourage cyclists to use an alternative route and not have to use that particular junction when trying to access the town by cycle or town centre. This is the A120 B115 junction. This is in Stow Upland, but that is the key junction that would require improvement as part of this planning application and the application at Diapers, and members will have noted from my from my application report that there is a memorandum of understanding between the developers in order to provide that junction improvement as part of Section 106 and a condition that will be imposed on the planning permission. That is another view of the access. If I just quickly turn to so at the last application, or the meeting when this application was last considered, it was deferred for 4 reasons, and they're numbered in the on page 20 of the agenda. If I work through the issues, hope you've had a chance to read the report, but if I just quickly go through the issues, I think the first thing to point out is that, sorry, not page 20, I do apologise, members, it's page 37. The first thing I should point out is following the meeting, there's a joint statement that's been produced by both applicants, which you'll have hoped to have had a chance to read, but basically assures that there would be joint working with regard to the 2 sites, bearing in mind that they're under separate ownerships and they're separate proposals, and it's inherent on trying to get a scheme that covers the whole development in essence, and I think that is the developers showing to the council that they understand that situation, the fact that there's necessary improvements required to the junction, and the need for connectivity, and that sets that out, the developer's position in that respect. In relation to issue number 1, the appropriateness of cycling active travel, I did touch on some of the issues there. There is the connectivity plan which you will have seen, which explains how the two sites link, notwithstanding the fact that one is outline and one is full. There's the proposal to include the pedestrian and cycle path as part of the spine road, which again is shown on the connectivity plan. And there's the issue of including or creating the shared cycle path, footpath, as you come out of the entrance onto Newton Road, which again are improvements, and the link through to the existing prow at the bottom of Stow Upland Road, which is going to be discussed as part of the Diapers farm application. In terms of issue number 2, I think one of the points that came out of the meeting last time was whether the examination, if that's the right word, of the impacted junctions locally was robust enough, whether that would actually been undertaken, because it was felt that experience of driving around locally doesn't match what was being said in the assessments. We've gone back to the Highway Authority just to clarify that particular point, and they've again reiterated, as far as they're concerned, they've looked at the relevant assessments, and they do believe that they are a robust assessment of the overall impacts. The other thing that we've received subsequent to the first meeting is an analysis document of all the impacted junctions that were agreed with the Highway Authority, and the assessment of each of those junctions, which culminated in the identified 1120 treble 15 junction being the one that would be over capacity and the one that requires the improvement, and hence the agreement that's been reached in relation to that through the Memorandum of Understanding, and also to be secured through Section 106 and the planning conditions. The other thing I think that came out of members' concerns in relation to access was the single point of access issue. And I know there was concern about that, notwithstanding the fact that eventually the site could link through to the other end through Diapers Farm. If you look at it as a standalone application, there is only a single point of access. As you'll have seen, the Highway Authority are content with that approach on the basis of the width of the access that's being provided, because it's being a 7.3 metre wide access. In their view, notwithstanding any works that may be taking place with drainage or whatever, you can still get past. So there will be access available through that particular proposed access point. And I'm advised that this form of access, or the single access point of that width, has been used elsewhere in the county. In terms of the appropriateness of open space provision, the plans that were shown previously in my presentation in relation to the development brief that was produced by the county do show the provision of open space towards the top of the site, which is the highest part of the site. And that was a response to the visual analysis that took place at that time when the brief was undertaken, and the illustrative plan that you have before you does replicate that. So the location of the open space matches the open space that's shown on that plan. And I think the other thing, bearing in mind the original allocation was for 400 in the SAP, Stowmarket Area Action Plan. This has been uplifted through the development brief process, and there will be undoubtedly a denser form of development being provided on the site than you would get with 400 units. So that would impact on open space provision generally. But I think in terms of the way the open space is arranged, it's still seeking to replicate the open space arrangement that was shown at the time of the development brief. Lastly, in relation to market housing, we've had a lot of discussion previously with the developers about affordable housing, but in terms of market housing, in order to meet the requirements of our strategic housing team, you'll note that we've agreed a form of wording for a condition that's on page 42 of your agenda, which seeks to link the provision to the SHMA that's relevant at the time. So that's something, again, that we've had confirmation from our strategic housing team that they're happy with that. Very, very quickly, last thing, if you refer to the tabled papers, we were suggesting originally that there would be a contribution to a travel plan originally. That has now changed because I'm advised by the travel plan team at County that they prefer to use conditions rather than taking a contribution. So there would be no need to include that as part of the Section 106 agreement heads of terms that are listed in my report, page 43. So that would be removed. I think that's all I possibly need to say at this stage, but I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so questions for points of clarity on that? Yes, Councillor Mayor, you're first up.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. A couple of points. The access point at the southern end of the site that you say is not within the red line, can you confirm there will be no access to that lane from the site? You look confused. Do I? The lane that runs up by the allotments.
Sorry it's taken so long. If I show you the connectivity plan, that's probably the best thing. Sorry it's taken so long. In terms of the access along here, it's not proposed to have any access, pedestrian or cycle, along there because it can't be offered. Is the bottom line? They don't own that access. Again, it looks from that drawing as if that access is included, but it's actually drawn. So the access is where my circle is, running behind the houses. And what that is meant to show, as I understand it, is the line of a drainage pipe that runs through part of the bottom of the allotment site. So it doesn't actually include that access. So there will be no formal access, if that's the right word, permitted or offered through that space.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Mansell, you want to go next?
Thank you. I think I've got a couple of questions. I've just got to remember what they are. Is there likely to be a danger that traffic will use the Spine Road as a sort of cut through and hence drive through the housing estate rather than go down to that mini roundabout? And if so, is there to be any traffic management bumps, narrows or whatever to prevent traffic using it as a cut through? That's my first question. The second question, is there any enhancement, improvement or work being done on the part of footpath 6, I think it is, from the Spine Road to Newton Road? It's currently a public footpath. It's marked on the map, but presumably at the moment it's just like the edge of a field, and it probably hasn't got a nice surface. I just wondered if anything was being done to improve that section of the footpath.
On the first one, the issue of the Spine Road, it would provide an alternative route, clearly, between Newton Road and Stow Upland Road. Motorists being motorists, myself one of them, it's the convenience of that route. I don't know about the issue in relation to calming, and my colleague may be able to advise further on that, but I would assume, and it's a big assumption I accept, if an alternative route is available, people will use it if it's as or more convenient and involves less congestion. I'm not sure that's really answered your question, but I think the option's there. The second thing, the footpath would have to be retained in its current position unless it was proposed or were proposed to relocate. But we can't actually advise on what will happen to that footpath until such time as the reserve matters application came in, because the design of the development would have to incorporate the footpath route in the same way as has been done on the next item, which we'll talk about.
So presumably that will be something that will be looked at when the reserve matters come through on this site. It will be, you know, it will be part of that application, what they eventually do with that part of that footpath. Because obviously it would be a convenient route for people to get from the estate on foot down towards town if they're from that particular part of the estate. That was all I was thinking about. But that would be something that comes through reserve matters.
Yes, it would,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a similar question. It's about sort of impact on junctions, and it is off beyond the red line of it. The first application, where the Spine Road comes out onto Newton Road, the next right turn along from that is Spring Row, which again would actually provide a cut through up to the roundabout and onto Violet Hill, the surgeries, Chantry Park, and wherever. The junction itself isn't, it's where the footpath where the pedestrian crossing is going to be put. My question is not specifically about the junction, but really along the roads going through it. They're very narrow. There's a lot of on-road parking, so it's reduced to single lane, and there's a level crossing. Would that, my suggestion on that, highways I suppose is, would that be possible to put that as access only to prevent traffic using that as a cut through onto the A1308?
I think that the driver behind the provision of the shared cycle footway that leads from Newton Road down to Spring Row, as opposed to the originally proposed footpath, was a recognition that if you use Newton Road for its entire length down to that junction as a cyclist, it's not a very pleasant environment. I haven't done it myself, but I could imagine it isn't. The ability of an alternative route to provide a safer or more pleasant means of access for cyclists down to the town centre is something that I think is possible, or the potential is possible, through that alternative route, accepting that perhaps it's not perfect in terms of the provision for cyclists making that journey. But I think at this stage we were looking at it in terms of, is there an alternative route that may be usable? Is this available, and can something be done to make it more attractive to users of cycles? So I think in that term we feel that is something that could be looked on more favourably than having to rely on the existing provision, which, well, I mean, cyclists could still use the existing provision, of course, if they so wished, but I think that at least there is an alternative that tends to push them away towards that alternative route, accepting that I understand the point you're making about the traffic online, on road parking and everything.
I would say if Catherine or Ben want to come in at any point, just look this way. We're happy to bring you in if you want to add anything to the questions.
So I have the second question is about the other development onto Stowmarket Road, where the road comes out onto Stowmarket Road, which is opposite, just up from a junction onto Stowmarket Road and some distance away from the roundabout. I'd have thought having that junction by the roundabout would have been a better option, moving it up the hill.
Well, as part of the application for Diapers, Council, I will go through that in some detail with regard to the means of access to the Diapers farm site, because I know that there is some disquiet locally and about where that is proposed to take place and why it isn't taking place off the roundabout. But I'm not sure we need to discuss it under this particular item.
We'll bring that. That'll be the next one.
I will be patient.
Thank you. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions. One is, could you point out the route to school from this development to, I believe it's Chiltern School? Because I'm just a little bit concerned. It's a kilometre, but it's not an easy kilometre on foot or on cycle.
We're talking about this particular point here. There would be a link through at this point, which would get you onto this main route here. Ooh. So that would access onto that road from that point. From that point there, that's the line between the two sites. But there would be an access point from there onto that public right of way. And the alternative would be to.
So if you're on foot or if you're on a bicycle, you've then got to come around the mini roundabout, and you may then have to wait at the level crossing.
Yes, there is a cycle, as we know, the cycle path along this route here. But yes, that is the case. You would need to do that.
That's on the wrong side of the road. You probably wouldn't cross over for that lane. Anyway, I just wondered whether some of the residents might use Cardinals Road because that's probably a shorter route to school from almost any part of that development. So those people would be using Cardinals Road, which we've already said is narrow with parking sometimes on both sides. By providing the cycle track footway along part of what I call Cardinals Road, but I think you called Spring Road, I just wonder if any thought has then been given, and I'm not sure whether I can see it on there, as you go towards, you come off Newton Road, you then come down to a fork where Cardinals Road with the terraced housing goes down on the left, and then there's Spring Row, and Spring Row goes down to the fence alongside the railway line, and then there's a footpath there. I just wondered whether it's possible to upgrade and to include it as a condition, whether any thought's been given to upgrading, providing a route through Spring Row and alongside the railway track.
Well, as I said previously, I think that at this stage, what we've considered is the original proposal was to have a footpath here. This is now a shared cycle route proposed as that. And what happens past that point in terms of having a set route for cyclists hasn't been given detailed consideration. I'm not sure we could impose a condition unless it was something that was required by the Highway Authority. But I think that the advice I was trying to give was that there is alternative routes available.
I wonder if, rather than discuss it at length now, whether we could flag that up as something to look at.
Well, I think you can bring it up with the applicant.
Okay. Right. The next question is on page 75. There's a reference to the A1120 B113 junction, and it's a suggested condition. Should that be 1115?
It should, yes.
Thank you. So when we get to the conditions, let's put 1115 in. The parking for the allotments, are we just providing enough parking for the cars that were shown there, or are we extending it any longer? My worry is that some of that could be on the inside of...
We're not here to express views now, it's just points of clarity.
Yeah.
The views can come later.
Yeah, is it just that length?
The proposal is to provide, and I accept it's not particularly clear, but it's provide a line of parking there and a line of parking there, which in total is 18 spaces.
Thank you. That was the question. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mayor.
Thanks. I was very interested to see the open space on the other side of the B113, and that raised some questions. Who owns it after the site is occupied? Who maintains it? And is there any protection on that land to prevent development on it?
The land is part of the planning application site, so it's under the ownership or control of the applicant at this point. Because of the constraints presented by the flood zones, it's conjecture, I know, but I don't think it's got much in the way of development potential. So that be its role as open space and also as part of the overall SUDS proposal for the development, bearing in mind that topographically it runs downhill and then goes down to the river plain. It's not being offered to the council, so although it would be public open space, it would be managed under a management agreement rather than being taken on by us.
So the purchasers of the properties will be required to maintain that area. So the people that buy the houses will have to contribute to maintain that space.
The terms of the management agreement, I don't know, but that is my understanding in terms of how the overall thing would work.
Right. My second question, if I may, in the Memorandum of Understanding, and I'll quote it, bear with me if you will, members can be assured that regardless of the development, which development comes forward, the approved highway works will be delivered at a point before the impact on the highway network becomes severe. That word severe again, we keep bumping into it, no definition of severe. You could make a case that the biggest impact of this development will be during the development phase, when they're moving all the vast amounts of earth, topsoil, etc. Is there any capability or possibility that the highway works can come prior to the start of development, thereby protecting the neighbourhood?
Chairman, yes, it might be useful just to ask Mr Chester to contribute. I think you'll find that severe does have some certainty around it. It's a word that highway engineers are quite used to, and perhaps Ben might usefully contribute to that and answer your question as we go. But just to clarify, severe is not an ill-defined grey concept. Highway engineers are quite familiar with it.
Look forward to hearing the definition of severe.
Hi, yeah. As far as junction capacity is concerned, it's when the junction reaches it, or passes its capacity, which is a figure up to 1, and when it reaches a point of past 0.85, we can consider that junction to be at capacity, and then anything beyond that we would generally request improvement. So it's a point at which the junction modelling shows beyond the capacity of the junction.
My concern really is along the B113, large earth-moving trucks. You get informal parking there at the moment, a small site entrance. I have concerns along what is a very rural road. So those upgrades, I'm sure the people that park their vehicles there would be delighted if they were done prior to all of this extra movement.
Well, we agreed on a point of occupation of 75 dwellings across the 3 sites that could co-fund this. We would generally find it hard to uphold an objection based on construction traffic because it's not a permanent impact. So generally speaking, we have to base our assessment on the permanent impact upon a junction, as opposed to the construction which is considered a temporary impact.
Philip wants to come in and add to that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to clarify, on page 36, we did advise that we would include reference to the memorandum of understanding that's described in the report. We'd include that as a head of term, and when we come to section 106, should we get there, then we'd obviously, it's not on the list of obligations, we would need to include that as an omission, just for clarity.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't part of the original committee that deferred this, and I'm just wondering, is there a reason why this application and the following one were to be determined concurrently? Is one application dependent on the other, or are they just totally both independent of each other?
They relate to the same allocation, but they are independent applications. And at the time the previous application came to committee, it was considered that it was in a form that it was able to be presented to committee, whereas the subsequent application hadn't reached that stage in officers' views. So we were able to bring the first one to committee on that basis, but as you'll have noted, that when it came to committee the first time, members were clear that they wanted them to come together, notwithstanding the fact that practically you could deal with them separately because it's part of the same application.
So
allocation.
The approval or rejection of this site has no bearing or impact on the approval or rejection of this site has no bearing upon the subsequent one.
No, they would need to be looked at independently.
Okay, fair enough. I've got a question on the allotments. I noticed that in the papers it says that the status of the allotments is not particularly sustainable at the moment. Is there any ability to provide water or fencing along that boundary that would help make the allotments a bit more sustainable?
The proposal before you today doesn't involve any works because it's an outline proposal. It doesn't provide details of any works to the allotment site. As I said at the start, it is land that is edge blue, so it's under the ownership or control of the applicant. That's something that potentially I assume might be under their control to do so, but it's not something that's proposed at this stage.
Okay. So we'll move on. If there are other questions, thank you. We now move on to Town Council. There's no one here, I understand, from the Town Council. We have no objector and we have no supporter. So we'll move on to the agent. We have Angela Brooke and Dan Bowditch here. If you have 3 minutes, we have a timer here. If you could keep to the 3 minutes, please, and over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Good morning, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this reconvened committee. At the July meeting, the application was deferred whilst clarity was sought on a number of matters, many of which cross into the adjoining Diapers farm site. The applicants for both schemes have subsequently met with officers to discuss these deferral points and to assist you with the clarity requested. I know some of these points have been covered this morning, but I just wanted to reiterate how each of these points have been dealt with. So in terms of active travel, Mr. Heffer has presented our connectivity plan showing the pedestrian and cycle routes across the whole allocation site and beyond. Main routes are shown alongside the new Spine Road, linking Newton Road to the west with Stow Upland Road to the east, providing onward travel to the existing cycleway. A new cycle route is also to be created along Newton Road down to Spring Row and towards the town centre, thereby avoiding the southern end of Newton Road. With regards to highways specifically, whilst this application is made in outline only with internal roads to be determined at reserved matter stage, the applicant understands and accepts that the council wish to secure a connection between the two sites. This the applicant agrees to and will be secured through a Section 106 agreement as per the officer's updated report. In terms of highway impacts, the Junctions modelled as part of the assessment identified that the A1120 B1115 Stow Upland Road junction as operating over capacity. A new roundabout is proposed to mitigate these impacts at this location, accommodating committed and proposed development traffic with low levels of queuing and delay. Mr. Bowditch from PJA, the applicant's highway consultants, is here today to answer any further questions you may have on this. Turning to open space, the master plan illustrates significant open space provision across the site, in excess of that required for this development, with proposed open space at the north-eastern corner of the site, retaining separation between Stowmarket and Stow Upland in accordance with the area action plan and the development brief. Finally, to ensure that the development provides a mix of house types, sizes and affordability, a condition has been agreed between parties to ensure that the housing mix to be secured at the reserve matter stage will be in accordance with the latest housing market assessment for the district. It should be noted that the positive dialogue between the parties of the adjoining schemes has been occurring throughout the application consideration and will continue to do so following the planning consent in order to facilitate delivery of the allocation in a coordinated and managed way. Officers have concluded that the application on this allocated site accords with the development plan and that there are no material considerations which indicate a decision should be taken contrary to their recommendation to approve this scheme. I call on you to recognise the significant merits of this sustainable scheme on an allocated site and urge you to support this proposal and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, we're talking about drainage in this application. We're dealing with surface water and the SUD schemes, aren't we?
Yes. What specifically are you questioning?
Well, yes. I just wanted to clarify that we're just looking at the surface water and the SUDs.
You turn your mic on so that people...
Sorry, we're dealing with the surface water and the sustainable drainage scheme as opposed to the foul water and arrangements with Anglia Water.
I think all of the details, there'll be more detailed, assessments have been provided at this outline stage, but further details will need to be submitted as part of conditions to look at that in further detail.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so we'll move on, if no other questions. So we'll move on to the ward members. Now we have 2 ward members here. Do you want to go first or second?
I'm acting here for maintain support.
So, okay, so I'll read out from Councillor David Muller, who couldn't be here today. It is long, so please bear with me. I appreciate this application forms part of the Stowmarket Area Action Plan and was designated as suitable for new homes, along with Diapers Farm Estate, which it joins. And I'm pleased to see there are no plans to build on Zone 1 area of the floodplain. Paragraph 4.2 refers to bus stops located in Stow Upland Road. Members should be aware, apart from the very infrequent bus service which uses Newton Road, all other bus services use Navigation Approach and Mortimer Road. Bus services are very infrequent on these routes, also twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. No bus service goes up Stow Upland Road. Paragraph 4.2 also says it is the intention of the proposed development that it may be accessed by either a new or extended bus service. However, although this would be welcome, in reality I cannot see it happening, bearing in mind the very poor bus service currently in operation on the Cedars Park estate. Newton Road is very narrow and currently only has a pavement on one side of the road. Residents usually park their vehicles outside their properties, making the road narrower. I'm pleased to see the proposed changes to the road network, which answers many of the issues raised by Stowmarket Town Council. It is extremely important a mitigation strategy for the junction with Stow Upland Road will be formulated between SCC Highways and the developers of both sites. I notice Highways England are not objecting to the scheme. I fully support the 3 character areas proposed across the site. Main Street, a tree-lined spine route, Avenue Core, an overlap between Main Street and the green frontage reflecting the character of the surrounding landscape, and I'm also pleased to see as many trees as possible will be retained. I support a proposer construction management plan for the site so the inconvenience to residents living in Newton Road is kept to a minimum during construction. I would recommend a condition ensuring work on the site is only undertaken between 8 and 5 Monday to Friday and 8 till 1 on Saturdays, with no work undertaken on Sundays. I welcome the proposed early years centre within the site. I do, however, have some reservations as follows, despite the proposed SIL payments. 1, Cedars Park Primary School is currently full. 2, the new Grace Cook Academy is also currently fully subscribed. 3, I understand Stow Upland Primary School is also full. 4, the result is children will have to travel further to school, which will, on balance of probabilities, mean more car journeys already on narrow roads, causing further congestion and air pollution. 5, neither Stowheath nor Coombs surgeries have the capacity for additional growth resulting from this proposed development at the present time. The town desperately needs a new primary healthcare facility, although I accept even if one were built, there would be a problem recruiting GPs, etc. No dentists in the town are currently taking on new NHS patients. To conclude, although there are some very positive aspects of this application, my concerns around school and health provision and the likely increase in traffic movements resulting in more air pollution, particularly when the level crossing is closed for trains to pass. I have witnessed considerable build-up of traffic at the junctions of Newton Road and Stow Upland Road, particularly between 8:30 and 9:30 and again in the afternoon when the barriers are down. It is with regret I do not feel I can support this application. Over to you.
The good thing about me and Dave working closer together, we do sing off the same hymn sheet. So I can't be quite as positive as he put it, because I still have a number of concerns. One of them being regarding the single point of access. Regardless of a trunk road, this single point of access is not going to be favourable for drivers. They're going to choose to go for a trunk road, which is going to impact on the parking regime, which we currently have issues with going on a B103. Regards the pathway, which is going to be adjacent to the curvature of the access. Being a pedestrian, the amount of times you've been on a pathway which is by a road and a car has gone across the pathway, I'd have concerns about pedestrians using it. Regards the, well, it's a bit tiring to see that we have ignored some of the objections we come across regards drainage and the current issues we have there. In the report it goes that it states that the drainage will be dealt with. We have no objections from Anglia Water. Well, I could mention about Anglia Water being in need of severe improvements. What is it, losing 170 millilitres a day currently, and also regards the issues of people living around the development have issues with the drainage. So we're not talking about prospective, we're talking about issues now. So adding on 300 homes to the area to an ongoing problem, that's not going to make residents there living there very happy. And also not to mention about how the Anglia Water, how it's currently handling the sewage going off into our waters. So that's not able to cope with existing demands. Let's have a look here. Dave has already mentioned about the lack of buses. I can expand on that. We recently had a disability forum meeting where we had all the bus developers there, and we asked about improvements to the access to Cedars Park, and they are, each one of them said it's not affordable. There's not a chance of expanding the bus route because they are not going to make money from it. So wonderful we put more bus stops, not so wonderful these bus stops are not going to be used. Dave touched on the schools, the open subscription. Well, yes, the Grace Cook, the new school, already oversubscribed till next year. The Chiltern School, which is the nearest one, well, they currently are using external huts to meet the demand. They do not have the space. We have Section 106 money going to go towards the schools. my concern is we're looking at 500 homes in total for 2 developments, where we have children already, 30 children to a class originally built for 12. What is that Section 106 going to do? It's going to buy them a lovely, shiny shoehorn to shove more children in. Where are these children going to go? We're going to have people driving more to reach out to the schools, going to impact more on the roads. We have Section 106 money going towards primary schools, we go to secondary schools. We have nothing going towards specialist schools. These specialist schools, I can tell you, are oversubscribed to 2024. How do I know this? I'm looking for one for my own daughter. So where are we going to drive these children to if there's none in the local area? We will provide some driving to the 12 miles. That's great, but how's it going to impact the driving out, going to school? How's it going to impact other residents? So we've got the transport links we've got there. We've already touched on the dentists, which no further NHS patients. The doctor's surgery, well again, at the moment we have pavement parking outside it because the car park is already full. We have a space for 5 additional doctors, which we cannot employ these 5 additional doctors. So already the doctor's surgery is oversubscribed. We have space for it, but we cannot get the doctors. We haven't been able to. So where are the people going to these developments? Where are they going to get treated? Where are they going to get to the dentists? Where are they going to go to school? So we have these local facilities, but are not going to be capable to do them. So we have more people driving. We either have them driving on a single point of access, which have impact on actually further impacts there, or we can have them driving down this trunk road, which we have pavement parking in the area, which is going to be it's already a problem. We're looking at the improvements to the road, which we've been touched on. These improvements should be done prior to development because the severity impacts to the people already using it. We have major issues now. So we are looking at prospective improvements down the line. It's not going to help residents living there now. It's going to severely impact people living there now. And we are going to have problems for people, once people live on this development, they're going to have problems in the future. So I'm afraid I just cannot support this development.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions for the ward member before we move on? No? Okay, members, so it's up to us to discuss, debate, and come to a conclusion. We've had all the information put before us. Over to us. Councillor Caston, you're going to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I can see the improvements that since the last application, even though I wasn't there. I think the connectivity plan, the cycling and pedestrian path on the spine roads an improvement, and the cycle footpath improvements on the Newton Road. I find this application quite difficult because we're essentially looking at a large application with a single point of access in this application, but obviously that changes with the next application. And I find it, I think that that single point of access wouldn't be acceptable to me if this was just the application on its own. But I understand there's other stages to this, reserved matters, but I think I've got to look at that as both of these applications at this point. I think the access going so close to Ashes Farm as well was a bit of a concern, but I think with the it looked like there was better places than putting it in by that listed building. But with the proximity to the A14, I think that that sort of dilutes that impact on the listed building there. Primary school contributions, it says for a new primary school. It sounds like that's needed from the wards, the ward members' accounts from it. I didn't see anything going to the surgery. I don't know if I've missed that in the papers, but it does seem like there should be contributions going to the surgery from this, with this amount of houses put together. I'm not absolutely made up on this. I think it looks to me like there could be more green space on this. They look fairly dense, but I think if we're looking at what's been solved with this application, I think it'd be very hard to say that it's not acceptable. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Can I just refer you to page 63? That's where the NHS correspondence is on for your info.
Thank you very much. I'll have a read through that now. Thanks.
Councillor Mansfield, you next.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that this is an improvement on what we saw back in July. And I really welcome the improved permeability for pedestrians and cyclists, the 3 metre wide cycleway along part of Newton Road. I welcome all of that. And I do take on board the reservations of the ward members, but there is a bit of a difficulty because this is an allocated site and houses will eventually end up on this site. And what we really need to be deciding today is this a suitable development to put on this allocated site? Unfortunately, there are a load of limitations in Stowmarket. We've just heard from the ward member about the schools, the doctors, the buses. Now, whilst it's all very well we can allocate some money from Section 106 to go to schools and doctors, we actually have no control over what the education provider, what the NHS and what the bus companies are going to do. We can't control that, unfortunately. And I realise that they are big problems in Stowmarket, and I really don't know what we do about buses because they just seem to be getting worse and worse and worse. And yes, it will end up, unfortunately, with more cars on the road, but we're going to get housing here, and what I think we really need to look at is this development good enough to put on that site? And I think that there have been some improvements. I don't personally live on a housing estate, but I'm not sure how worried I'd be about people using the spine road as a cut-through. Whilst I appreciate that mini roundabout on the 113, 115 junction is not ideal, they are the trunk roads, and should we be doing more to discourage, shall I say, drivers from using the housing estate roads, which might have a load of kids and bikes and what have you crossing the side roads and stuff? Should we be doing more to discourage them from using that as a cut-through? Maybe people who've got more experience of that might have a comment to make, but I'm not sure if that is an issue or not. So I must admit I'm erring towards supporting this application because I think there are a number of conditions which hopefully will mitigate some of the harm. The open space on the floodplain, and that's not going to have houses on, is good. I think that the access arrangements off Newton Road, because of the shape of the site and that location of the listed farmhouse, make it a little bit contrived. And it's a bit of a sort of twinkly access right up close to the A14, but I'm not sure what else we can do. Where else would you put access onto this site? I'm not going to make any proposal, but I'd like to hear what others have said. But I mean, I actually think this is an improvement on what we saw before, and I think it's certainly almost acceptable. And I'd like to hear what others have got to say. Thank you.
Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to answer Councillor Caston, the NHS contribution is the last bullet on page 43, so hopefully that picks up. And I fully accept we regularly hear issues relating to surgeries, and I fully understand that. We are, I think, we must be realistic as to what we can achieve with an application in these circumstances. There is a contribution which you've captured, and hopefully that reflects what's sought by the NHS Direct, the last bullet on page 43 of the obligations. If I can just speak slightly, whilst I have the microphone, Chairman, to the connectivity and permeability point. I mean, following the last committee meeting, Mr. Heffer and I met with the applicants and talked to some length with the support of Catherine Davis about the cycling and walking links. Cardinals Road is not perfect, but speaking as a cyclist, having used Newton Road, I find it a preferable option to an experience on a B road with traffic in a narrow carriageway and on-street parking too. Cardinals Road does have on-street parking, but one side of that road, by the power of Google, I understand has a single yellow line which appears practically to be stopping parking, and therefore to create some more space than were there simply no control over parking. It also takes you into town through Crown Street and to the end of Bury Road, and as a route into Stowmarket, as a cyclist, and not a route I take personally, but knowing the roads as I do, I would think that would be desirable and preferable as a way of getting from this development as a more pleasant experience. I'll leave that there. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. I have reservations about this site. The sustainability, the social aspects, we've already heard about doctors, dentists, schools. Drainage, angular water, chucking thousands of litres into our rivers. Access, highways, it will be all right when it's finished. And I personally have an issue with large green areas that will be maintained under a contract for 10 years, and then we're going to have impacts that some of our council members are already dealing with vastly increased costs. But all of that is irrelevant. In the CCG say it's all right, bung us some money, we can cover it. Angular Water say, don't worry, we've got the capacity. Highways have approved it, and there is a management contract in place. This is an allocated site. It has improved since last time. So whilst I have personal reservations, I feel that we should approve it, and I'm happy to propose that we do approve.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that at this stage? Councillor Caston.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue the debate. Anyone? Yep, Councillor Wenham.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with much of what's been said already. Just one or two other points that I would make, and I think these really could be taken up as part of the reserved matters. I am concerned about the route to school, and I would like some consideration given to the use of Spring Row and the footway alongside the railway line, because that leads to Crown Street, which would be an excellent way into town, much preferable, as Mr. Isbell has said, than Newton Road and Stow Upland Road. So I would like that looked at. I don't think it will be expensive, because most of the infrastructure is there. It's just a case of making a few links, I think. So could that be looked at? I think we have to accept that the Spine Road will be used for through traffic because of the congestion, particularly when the barrier is down, the congestion around the mini roundabout. And also there is quite a windy alignment with parking, which brings me on to the parking spaces. And the reason I asked about the number of parking spaces, I guess they're not just for the allotments, they are hopefully to reduce the number of cars parked on Newton Road itself overnight. It's quite a windy road, and it looks to me as if some of those car parking spaces that are being provided by way of a lay-by are going to be on the inside of the bend, and there could be visibility problems as a result. Not huge, but I guess that it's better to have the spaces there with the visibility restrictions and not have them at all. I welcome the memorandum of understanding. I think officers have done a good piece of work there. I think they've taken it as far as they possibly can, and the ward members for Stow Upland have spoken with Bradley, and we've made we're happy with the way that is going. If I may ask a question, it's about the pedestrian crossings. Could I just check whether any of them are going to be zebra crossings or anything other than just drop curbs. I guess that they're just pedestrian crossing points rather than pedestrian crossings. Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's an allocated site. It's probably as good as we're going to get. It's better than we might end up with on another day. So, provided the two sites, the Ashes Farm and the Diapers Farm, both go ahead, and the memorandum of understanding comes into place to improve. The only other thing I would add, and that's a concern about construction traffic, I would hope that even a temporary access for construction traffic would not be off Stow Upland Road, and particularly not off the little track that's between, I think it's a listed building, and the former council houses. I think that any construction traffic, whether it's a temporary access or a permanent access, should be on Newton Road, but that's not ideal. So, yeah, those are my points.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak? I'll have my word after you, Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'd like to support what Councillor Wellham's just said, particularly with regard to a condition, if we can apply it, with regard to the pedestrian and cycle route down Spring Road and possibly along the railway line onto Cardinal Road, providing an attractive route, as Mrs. Isbell just said, an attractive route into town and a safe route, and to sort of try and sort of exclude through traffic from that area. I do have another concern though, and this site is 300 houses plus the additional site, and it's going to have a considerable impact on infrastructure. Anglia Water have actually said it currently does not have the capacity to treat the flows from the development site. I presume it means from the development site. They say they're obligated to accept the foul flows, and elsewhere it says they're producing an acceptable way of treatment. Anglia Water's received considerable publicity recently regarding what it regards as adequate treatment and what the public regards as adequate treatment. Is it possible to have a condition in this where we need a more detailed response from Anglia Water that they will be treating the foul water not just adequately, but in order to prevent additional discharges?
I'll bring in Philip on that, and you wanted to come in anyway, Philip.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think it would be reasonable to impose it. It's beyond the control of the applicant. We haven't done it in other situations to impose a condition to require some standard of treatment which we don't have set in policy. So we have advice from Anglian Water. I think to require the applicant to hold their development hostage to some sort of treatment standard to be agreed with Anglian Water, I think would be unreasonable, and I wouldn't recommend it to a committee as a point. But that wasn't the comment I was going to make, Chairman. But would you rather hand back to Councillor Warboys at this point and just carry that debate on?
Well, I think that the answer is it's not really in, I mean, of course you could propose it, but it's not really in our gift to put that pressure on the applicant, because it's nothing really to do with the applicant. Did you have a follow-up at all?
Unreasonable.
Well, it's within the remit of this committee and the remit of the applicant.
Yeah.
I think, if I may, Chairman, I think Mr. Isbell is advising you, and I reluctantly agree with him, that it's one of the legal tests for a condition is that it's reasonable, and I think Mr. Isbell's advising you it isn't reasonable, so there would be a risk of its legality or it being overturned on appeal.
Thanks. Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to ensure we've covered the points, I mean, there has been debate about the nature of the spine road. That was baked into the development brief for this site. It is an anticipated feature. It is expected to exist, I think, with traffic calming measures built into the detail of that. then inevitably there will be some leakage of traffic using it as a through, much as there is on Cedars Park itself between B113 and the A14. I mean, I use that myself, so this does happen, and we're realistic. But it also creates, it is expected within the development brief. It was anticipated right at the outset in the allocation in the area action plan, so this is not a new concept. But can I also follow up on Councillor Wellham's query about Spring Row? Spring Row appears to terminate at the railway line, and then there is a footway running along the back edge of the houses, which arrives at Cardinals Road. Whilst that might be traffic-free, I'm not clear how well observed that is and how safe and secure that would be as a route for a cyclist moving down there. And I would probably be inclined to say that it's 6 and 2 3s in terms of desirability of routing somewhere. I think with Cardinals Road you have forward visibility as you go, you are certainly more observed generally within the public domain. So as a sort of safe route cycling onwards from Spring Row, my instinct is that is desirable, and I'm not sure what one could do about getting from Spring Row to elsewhere in the town, because Cardinals, there is, both arrive at the same crossing point over the railway line, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just add my comments. I really agree with everything that's been said. The site is a site that's due to come forward. We have seen considerable improvement. There are still some issues on the site, clearly, that will never go away, but I think I go back to Councillor Mansell and Councillor Mayor's point about, we were expecting something on this site. Have we got the best we can get? Well, it's better than it was, and it has improved, and we just need to keep working with the applicant, and when it comes back to us, hopefully we'll see various things in there that will also have been taken on board from today's meeting, so I'll be supporting it as well. So I think on that basis, it's been proposed by Councillor Mayor and seconded by Councillor Caston, just observing that in the recommendations on page 44, it should be B1115 rather than B1113. But on that basis, I think we're happy to go to a vote. But Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, 2 small points of housekeeping. With relation to the second bullet of the obligations, we've got commitment to a connection to the spine road. I think what we actually want to see is commitment to the connectivity plan and a spine road. So that's a small tweak to that, and I think that then delivers the principles of the connectivity plan. And elsewhere, I think I said on page 36, there's reference to the memorandum of understanding being linked into the section 106, and I don't think that's one of those errors we've left for members to spot, and we'd wish to add that as a section 106 commitment too. And with those 2 points, Chairman, happy to leave the recommendation.
On that basis, we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Councillor Castle, would you like me to take your vote verbally?
Yes, could I please vote for, please?
Thank you. Councillor Wellham, are you okay, or would you like me to take your vote verbally?
I can't. For whatever reason, I can't get the vote on there, but I'm in favour. I'm for.
Thank you. Chair, that's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Can I thank those that joined us for this application? What we'll do is we'll take a quick, literally, we'll start again about 5 past by that clock, 11, which just gives the opportunity for people to change seats and have a quick comfort break. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you. So we're going to move on now to the second item for today's agenda, which is DC 2103-287. Again, back to you, Bradley, to take us through this application.
Thank you, Chair. Second application we're being asked to look at this morning, members, is a full application. It's on the adjacent land to the area we were just talking about in the previous application. It's known, I'll refer to it from now on as Diapers Farm. Confusingly, the overall allocation is known as Ashes Farm, but we've divided it into Ashes on the previous application and Diapers on this one. As I said, it's a full planning application that seeks permission for 258 units. This is the wider aerial view map, which again, you'll see the application site, and to the south, Stowmarket, and to the northeast, Stow Upland, and obviously the line of the A14 trunk road at the top, which is the other key feature on that. This is a larger scale aerial map, and again you'll note that the site abuts the line of the A14 and also Stow Upland Road, and also abuts partially the curtilages of existing dwellings in this location here, with the remainder of the boundary abutting Ashes Farm to the west. You also note a white area here, which is an aerial view of the chicken sheds that formerly operated on part of the site and now defunct, still in situ. This is a red line application site. The only thing I would point out on this particular plan to note would be where the red line is in relation to the roundabout, because that's pertinent to discussion in relation to access. This is a constraints map. Few constraints on the site as such in relation to the things you would normally note, but it's adjacent to the built-up boundary, which is on the opposite side of Stow Upland Road, the built-up boundary of Stowmarket. You see the A14 again. You'll see the PEC line, which is the blue-green PEC line, which is the line of the public footpath network, which runs through the site. And also you'll note there are some listed buildings in the vicinity. This extract, again, you'll have seen from the previous presentation, is taken from the development brief. The area we're talking about here is Zones 2 and Zone 3. Zone 3 is a separate zone within the development brief, which is drawn around the former chicken sheds and its environs, their environs. This is the concept plan, which shows both sites linked. You'll have seen the extract before on the Ashes Farm site. Be familiar with the organisation of space there. A similar approach is taken with regard to development on Diapers Farm in concept, so therefore you have open space provision at the top, lower scale or lower density development nearer the corner, or the northeastern corner of the site, higher density development in darker colours, and the line of the spine road through. And you'll also note the line of the footpath. Sorry, I should have noted there as well that the arrows show points of access, and again that's an indication on the concept plan. This is the site layout that shows the proposed development. As I say, it's sought full planning permission. Just note the main features on this one are the means of access to the site, which is off Stow Upland Road by way of the spine road, which takes up to the boundary with Ashes Farm. There's a second point of emergency access proposed, where you can see my red dot, in addition to the main point of access. So there are 2 points of access here. There's also a proposal within the design to have a cycle link at that point. The general arrangement of open space is such that the main open space is at the top of the site, which also includes an area of play. It's an informal landscaped area, but it's got an area of play within it. And there's a secondary area of open space to the west of the site, which links in with the line of the footpath, which is contained within the open linear space you can see there. Other areas of open space to the south would be contain SUDS features, and the nature of the SUDS would be that both of those features would contain standing water, so they would contain water year round. So it's important to note that. And in general arrangement of the built form, it's, as you can see, generally perimeter blocks. In other words, you have frontages onto main roads with amenity spaces behind. There's a main avenue of development through the site, and smaller clusters of development off of private drives. The other element I'll point out at this stage is that the development faces towards, on this side, faces towards Stow Upland Road. This is again this is the landscape concept plan, which just indicates the green provision across the site, and the fact that there is a degree of linkage between the green areas, not least for wildlife corridors. So in fact you have a smaller landscaped area towards the edge next to the flatted block, and then you'll have a line of planting, hedging, leading to the larger open space area and continuing along the boundary. And then there would be a landscape corridor down this part, leading to the wider open space. And again, you'll see the more formal tree planting indicated along the spine road. This is the location of the affordable housing across the site and the mix. The proposal meets the policy requirement of 35%, and it's in a mix of shared ownership and affordable rented units. Very recently, the strategic housing team has agreed the mix that's shown on that plan. So in terms of the recommendation, as I've said in the table papers, which I'll go on to, that's now been amended to reflect that point. When the application came in, there was no proposals to add any heating systems apart from gas boilers. Through negotiation with the developer, we've reached a position now where a total of 108 plots in the buff colour would include air source heat pumps as part of the first, or would as part of the development, and the area in the blue colour would be a further 35 plots which would have that provision made in the future. And you can see areas of the affordable housing provision are included in that. So it covers the whole tenure within those particular areas. This is a proposal, this plan shows the main vehicular access into the site. The key points to show you here are the access itself. There is an island that's currently in position to the left of the main access, proposed access. That is proposed to change or be altered to a toucan crossing. So there'll be a provision of a new crossing there. And this also shows a provision of a new bus stop in this location. And you can just about see the emergency access point there. In the slightly wider area, you've got a proposed bus stop being shown at the south of the site, and also a crossing point on this arm, a pedestrian crossing point on this arm of the roundabout, proposed to the north. This is a connectivity plan within the site itself, which shows the provision of the main spine road and the secondary roads leading off of that, and also the routes of the cycle paths that would follow through the site. You'll note that the cycle path shown here uses the route of the public right-of-way, and in order to do that, that would have to be upgraded to right-of-way status. So that's something that will be captured within the means to do so would be captured within the Section 106 agreement as requested by County. There would be a point of access onto the road here for cyclists adjacent to the main access. Cyclists would also have the opportunity to use the point where emergency vehicles could take access as well. And the third point of access could be through the existing public right-of-way to the south, which would be upgraded to right-of-way. This is the connectivity plan that you saw with the previous application as well, just to show the synergy between the two sites. I won't go through too much detail insofar as just reiterating that there are the 3 points of access for cyclists along here. As I say, it's a full application you're considering, so you are considering details, design, layout. This shows typical street scenes. The architecture is similar, not the same, but similar to architectural approaches taken on newer developments in the area, particularly in relation to Cedars Park opposite. The other thing you will glean from that slide is the changes in levels. The blue lines you can see on the plan here are the street scenes that are interpreted here. So you can see there are some level changes that the site would need to address as part of the development, and that's through the topography, obviously, as it sits at the moment. There is one instance of a 3-storey unit, which is the flatted block. This would be located at the northeastern end of the site, adjacent to the roundabout. As is said in the report, the design of that has been varied since the initial submission, and it's been worked up into a position where we feel it's an appropriate location, or it's an appropriate design of building for that location. That's the floor plan of that building. Generally, the buildings follow a vernacular architectural approach. I know members will have seen this type of development on a number of presentations. I don't propose to spend too much time in relation to this. The palette of materials, as you'd expect, is a mixture of brick, render, and tiled roofs, which again is a palette that's usually found in this location. That is an example of a 2.5-storey building by 2.5 stories, rooms in the roof. So you see it's dormer on the front, but generally the buildings are 2 stories with the one example of a 3-storey. That's one of the rendered units. They've proposed, or developers proposed, to use more rendered units along the Spine Road and adjacent to open spaces as a way of introducing more character into the development and more creation of space. There's another 2.5-storey unit. In terms of the approach to the site, this is the approach coming from Stow Upland on the B115. These are taken from Street View. This approach gets nearer to the roundabout, and I've included that slide because it gives you an idea of the sort of architecture that's on the other side of the road adjacent to the site. This is the actual approach to the roundabout itself, and the site we're talking about would be to the right-hand side of that picture. Again, that's probably a nearer view. These were taken a while ago, but the sweep you're about to see is of the land, which is again open unused land. In the background there you'll see the chicken sheds. That's again an example of the architecture on the other side, which does follow a traditional approach, including details that you'd expect to find on that sort of architecture. This is a view from the top of the road. The northernmost bus stop that I talked about quickly in my presentation earlier would be roughly in this position. This is the site of the emergency access, and I know it's difficult to get an idea of context overall, but it is taking a gap in the original frontage. That's a close-up of the chicken sheds, which are in situ. This is an approximate position of the main access, and if I show you, unfortunately it doesn't sweep around far enough, but that point is about where my dot is there. This is the access, the junction between the B115 and this road, which is also called Stowmarket Road, which is rather confusingly. But the other thing that you can see there is the splitter, the island in the centre, and that would be the position of the Pedestrian Crossing. This is views down the road. I've included this one because in summer at least you'll note how verdant the greenery is on either side of the road, and this is proposed, certainly in the case of Diapers Farm, would be retained as much as possible as one of the key elements as a development benefit. I mentioned earlier about access being taken via an existing public right-of-way, which is contained within a private road which comes out onto the B115. This is views looking up that road. This originally served as it serves as an access to residential development, but also enabled access to the chicken sheds. And as I say, this contains a footpath, so the line of that would be retained within the development. I think that's the end of the presentation. The other things I'd want to cover off at this point are, if I refer you to the tabled papers, at the time that the report was drafted, we hadn't had comments back from various consultees, and we've now received those. In the case of the strategic housing team, as I said in the report, in the presentation, they've agreed the mix. So there is no need now to defer the proposal in order to change design of dwellings on individual plots, which was the way that the original recommendation to you was set out in the papers, using the confusing XYZ reference. So the strategic housing team have confirmed they're okay. The lead local flood authority have now said they're okay. The reason for the delay in their response was that there'd been an increase in the percentage limitation from 40 to 45%, and so the developers had to readjust their SUDS proposals to address that, which has now been done. The climate change allowance. So that's now been incorporated in information that's with us, so we don't need the lead local authority have confirmed that. The sustainability officer has confirmed that he's happy with the approach that's been taken and suggested a condition which we think can be imposed on a grant planning permission. The noise officer has said that although they're using air source heat pumps, he needs to know the combined acoustic impact of the air source heat pumps, and that would be dealt with through a revised acoustic assessment. So if you were minded to accept the recommendation, one of the reasons for deferral would be to receive that information in a revised acoustic assessment. So on the basis of the above, as I said, the recommendation's been changed, and you'll see Part A, the agreement with the acoustic assessment, and then Part B follows on as in your original papers insofar as deferral to secure the Section 106 obligation as set out in the original report.
And finally, I've mentioned in there about there is adequate flow. I know it was an issue that was raised under the previous application, but under this proposal, Anglian Water have confirmed that there is adequate flow within the treatment water recycling centre. So the condition is not deemed to be necessary. So again, if you were minded to accept the recommendation, that condition would not be appearing on the decision notice.
Thank you very much. Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is going to be somewhat embarrassing in the sense that are we now saying, Bradley, that we do not need one little a, which includes the XYZ reference, which we obviously intended to refer to specific plots, but perhaps you can just clarify that so we're clear what's the state of that element of the Section 106 recommendation.
Yep, the revised recommendation is on page 5 of the table papers, below the bold lettering, where it says, on the basis of the above, the recommendation to members is revised as follows. So that is the recommendation you're now being asked to endorse.
Chairman, if I can just come back on that, and this is really not the How to Conduct Officer internal liaison over applications. I mean, clearly there are a number of Section 106 remaining in there, but presumably that's an amendment to 1, is it then? So that item 1 of the recommendation becomes what you're proposing on page 5 of the item 1, which is the Section 106 introductory, then becomes what's written in substitution of what's on page 199. Is that how I understand it?
Okay, thank you. Well, I've got some questions, so I'll just use, as we're into questions of clarification. So Bradley, a couple of questions. So in terms of triple parking, there seems to be a lot in here from what I could see. So could you just take me through how much triple parking is there? And we know that with triple parking, people then go and find alternative places to park when they don't triple park. So where are they expected to park? That's my first question. Then I've got something about the affordable housing afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Having looked at the triple parking provision, out of a total of number of plots, 37 are shown as being triple parking arrangements. So I calculate that as being 14% of the total amount. Where there are instances of triple parking, they're off of private drives as opposed to main roads. And the organisation of visitor spaces is such that there is visitor spaces near to the areas where triple parking provision is made.
So how many visitor parking spaces are there?
It meets, I think it's there's 66 in total, which meets the requirement, our parking requirement.
We'll come back to that in debate, I'm sure. Okay, and then in terms of the affordable housing blocks, there are 4 that basically back onto the A14. What is the height of those? So will someone who lives in the top floor affordable house be looking at traffic on the A14 out of their windows?
The units you can see now are 2-storey, with the exception of this building, which is 3-storey. So these are all 2-storey along here, as well as the planting boundary, which would be put along here. because of the acoustic impact of the fencing, of the A14, there will be a 3 metre high fence running along there and across the top of the site in order to attenuate the noise arising from the A14. The houses are orientated so that the front-facing bedrooms of those dwellings, for example, these ones here, would face across that space to the north, so they would be able to look, if there's a bund of 3 metre, it's a 3 metre fence, you would be able to look over that.
So effectively, those that are on the top floor of affordable housing are looking at the traffic on the A14 whenever they're in their bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I too was going to ask about the triple parking, so thank you very much for asking that for me. I do have some other queries about the parking. You've just said that the number of visitor spaces meets the parking standards. Can you tell me if the parking over the whole of the site either just meets or exceeds the guidance? I'd also like to ask about electric vehicle charging, because it appears that only some of the properties are going to be equipped with EV charging, and it looks like all of the affordables do not. So could you just confirm the electric vehicle charging spaces, and then if you answer those ones about parking, and then I've got another question I'd like to ask as well.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm just trying to find a relevant section in my report, because I do mention car parking provision. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty finding it at the moment, but in terms of the answer, the parking provision is in accordance with, with the provision. In terms of electric vehicle charging points, there are on-plot proposals where units would have their own drives, but elsewhere there's proposals to put infrastructure to serve some of the communal plots, but not all of them. But I think that, as indicated in the papers, the developer has indicated or has advised that they would be willing to provide electric vehicle charging points in accordance with our requirements in any event, and they would be content with a condition to be imposed on a grant of planning permission if that was felt appropriate.
Thank you. So I presume you meant with our requirements we can impose, we have the ability to impose a condition that there is electric vehicle infrastructure provided for all the dwellings.
I think that's in your gift, yes.
And my other questions are related to the access, and that we've got a red line plan for this site. We don't have a blue line plan like we did for the other one. And just partly out of curiosity and partly because people have raised the issue of the access and the roundabout, that bit of land between our red line and the roundabout at the top of Stow Upland Road, is that in highways ownership or private ownership?
I understand it's not in the ownership of the applicant. Who owns it, I don't know, is the short answer. I don't know if my colleague can answer if it's highway land. I suspect it isn't. But I understand it's owned by a third party.
And finally, my other question, so we've got 108 which are to be heated by air source heat pump. We've got 35 which might be. That leaves 115. So how are they being heated?
they will be heated conventionally through the use of gas boilers, I assume.
Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much. In the contamination report on this site, we've got a risk of ground gases. How far have we gone to assess the risk that, considering there was chicken sheds on the site, that animal manure has been stored or incorporated into the surrounding fields, and the risk of having like high levels of phosphates in the soil there? What assessment have we done of that, please?
The Land Contamination Officer has relied on the information that's been provided by the applicant in relation to ground conditions. We haven't asked for any further information. He's based his recommendation on the information that is available on site. On the stuff that you've seen. Clearly, there's an issue in relation, well, as assumed as a non-expert, in relation to the chicken sheds because of the previous use and the quasi-industrial nature of that use. The use on the wider agricultural land, I'm not sure if that, well, I don't think that has been assessed in terms of potential land contamination, but the point exists that the risk or the remediation rests with the developer in any case. So if there were instances where contamination was detected that was unknown, I think there is legislation separate to planning which deals with that as an element anyway. So there is that safeguard, and I think that that's picked up in some of the consultation response we've had from the Land Contamination Officer.
Councillor Caston, anything else? No? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the density of the housing, I wonder, is there a upper limit that any applicant has to comply with? I notice it's 28.6 in this application, 22.6 in the previous one. Is there an upper limit that they have to comply with?
There's no upper limit insofar as a density. I mean, density is linked to the appropriateness of built form in a particular location, and what might be an acceptable density in an urban location clearly wouldn't be acceptable in a less urban situation. I think one of the key elements we have to bear in mind that as part of the allocation, as uplifted by the development brief, there is a ceiling on the amount that you can get there anyway on the overall site, and everyone has to have cognizance of that, because that's going to
up to
govern the amount that you can put on there. But there isn't actually an upper limit within anything that would define how they develop.
Thank you.
Councillor Wellham, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about the main access point and the splitter island, or the pedestrian refuge in that island. Bearing in mind that a lot of pupils use the cycle track along there, is that splitter island large enough to accommodate significant numbers of students and perhaps parents with prams and bikes and so on? If not, is that something that could be looked at? It is a concern at the next access along that goes into the Linden Home site, so I wouldn't want us to have a problem there.
I'm hoping my colleague might be able to address that particular.
Yeah, the splitter island is 2 metres wide, which is the standard size that we would.
I appreciate it's the standard size, but I think well, we'll come to it in debate, because I've obviously got a view on that. The approach to the Toucan crossing, will the wearing course be taken up and an appropriate high skidding resistance wearing course be put onto the approaches? Is that proposed?
It would be as part of the.
It will be.
The section 278 works, yeah.
There are three points where cyclists could emerge onto the cycle track alongside Stowmarket Road, are they going to be provided with some sort of barrier to prevent the cyclists coming out at speed?
We generally don't support the use of barriers on cycle tracks. So it would be
not across the cycle track,
yeah,
as it approaches a road.
Yeah, there aren't any proposals to, no.
Because we're in discussion about another site on just this very point, aren't we? Well, I'm grateful for that view. The flats, the noise levels at the top floor, because as part of that top floor, I would guess the bedrooms are almost facing the A14. Presumably they have been checked. We don't have any. Obviously, from the bedrooms you'll see the traffic, but will you hear the traffic?
With regard to that one, Councillor, there was a noise assessment submitted as part of the planning application, where the impact of the A14 was looked at on the accommodation. And in regard to the ones that there is the view issue, which the chairman mentioned, but also with regard to location and noise impact, the mitigation of that is through glazing and ventilation, the ones nearest the A14.
Yeah.
That is what's proposed.
Yeah, thanks. The rendered units, will the rendering be on all four walls, or is it just a little wraparound at the front? There are a few units that are shown as having a full rendered front, but are the other three walls rendered?
Where render is being used, it's a specific discussion that we've had with the applicant. It has to be used in a way that is logical in terms of a construction approach, and I think that you'll see from the design of the buildings that if rendered buildings are proposed, they're rendered all the way round. If elements of the building are to be rendered, like a particular projection, they're rendered until they meet the main body of the building. So it's a logical...
So there are some of the units that are rendered all the way round?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any bungalows on the site?
No.
There's a bus service contribution of 231k on page 195. Presumably somebody has calculated that figure, and do we have an idea who ultimately is going to be responsible, which body will be responsible for the spending of it, and what might it be spent on?
We've been guided by Suffolk County Highways, the public transport officer, if that's the correct term, in terms of the amount that is appropriate for this site and the pro rata payment. I'm not sure if you can add any further on the way that would work, Ben.
Sorry, it was for 500,000 split across the two sites, yeah, and the passenger transport officer said it will be service improvements, so I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I suspect it's to fund to either retain or introduce bus services.
So hopefully it will be to introduce a bus service to these two developments.
Or to retain and
there's nothing to retain.
A service. Well, he did speak about putting a service through the spine road. So to divert a service.
Well, we can't take that any further, I don't think. So thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morley, then Councillor Warboys, then Councillor Mansell.
My question follows on from Councillor Mansell's, actually, regarding air source heat pumps. So you've got two sectors there. The brown bit, which will have heat pumps, the purple area which might have heat pumps, and it says it's dependent upon timings. What is the timing issue that covers that?
The drawing does show the two areas. The blue area refers to something that could happen in the future. The drawing actually says depending on timing or timing. I'm not entirely clear what the timing is. I've read that there is an intention to put a second tranche of air source heat pumps within the buildings. The developer is here, so he may be able to provide more information on that.
And on the homes where there is no such designation, whose decision is that down to? Is that down to the developer or the purchaser? What if the purchaser decides they want heat pumps? And my subsequent question is, what does that mean for the noise calculations that are being done based just upon that one brown area?
Well, again, my understanding would be if you look to purchase a house within the brown area, assuming that that's the bit we're talking about first, you would get an air source heat pump that would be within the building constructed that you buy. I think in regard to the issue of sorry, I forgot what the second part of the question was. Oh, it was, what was it to do? Sorry?
Buildings that aren't designated currently for heat pumps, whose choice is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether the developer would offer an option. If they're being provided elsewhere on the site, that's potentially something that may be offered. I don't.
Let's ask the developer when they come up.
But in terms of the, I think in any event, you're right, the environmental health officer's recommendation or his comment does pick up the fact that there is a noise that's generated by these installations anyway, and I think he needs to know how that impacts generally between dwellings on the site and those on the periphery which are nearest to the site anyway, hence his recommendation to us.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to clarify, on slide 7, this is to do with the roundabout, and my initial question was whether it wouldn't have been advantageous to have the spinal road joining the B1115 at the roundabout rather than midway between the roundabout and Stow Upland Road, especially as there's now an emergency access point there as well. Presumably the fact that that bit of land is in a third-party ownership, but it's actually shown as part of the soft landscaping on slide 7.
Sorry, Councillor, that slide 7 is a concept plan. That's
Yeah.
that's not been submitted by the applicant. So that's just been included because that's an extract from the development plan which the council produced, which shows how the site might be used overall. Slide 8,
Yeah.
which is their full plan. This area here is outside of the development proposal, so there's no proposals to do anything with that land as part of this planning application. But you'll note that if I show you slide 9, that might be no, it's not because it's cut off by the text. Slide 8, you'll see that in that corner it's proposed there'll be additional planting adjacent to the flatted development. So we can't ask them to do anything on that because it's outside of the development site, but we've obviously, or there's conditional control can be imposed on that element of it.
Mm-hmm. I have a second question. There's no provision being made on the site for photovoltaic arrays on rooftops. We've had some discussion about air source heat pumps and whether they might be the possibility of prospective purchasers choosing that as an option. Would it be possible to also put photovoltaic cells, fit them at the initial stage of the building rather than having to fit them retrogressively afterwards. Presumably it would be cheaper for the purchaser to fit it as the building's being built rather than have to do it later.
Yeah, same, in a way it's the same answer I'll give Councillor Morley in terms of what my understanding is. There's an area that was shown on that plan that where they will be provided as part of the construction. There's an area that they could be provided as part of a future, and I think, and again, the developer may be able to flesh this out, but I think the concern was more to do with availability or technology in later phases and how that might change. But the option, I assume, would be in the gift of the developer to offer these on more development or more dwellings throughout the site as part of the overall development. But it's not something that's actually shown on the plans in front of you.
No.
Thank you. Do you have one more?
Well, just to clarify that, this came up at a development meeting yesterday, where it was asked of the where it was asked to put in as a condition that purchasers could have the option to fit more contemporary forms of heating rather than what is rapidly becoming old technology.
Okay, we can bring that up in debate if you feel. Councillor Mansell, back to you.
Sorry, Chair, there were a couple of other things I wanted to ask about and I forgot in my previous time. Back to parking again. Is there are numerous little bits of green space, including the attenuation basins and the sort of open space at the north area. Is there any plan to put any means of preventing cars parking on the grass there, like a sort of knee rail or whatever they're called?
The recommendation would be to agree a landscaping scheme. There is a landscaping scheme, but a detailed landscaping scheme would be more detailed than the scheme that you've just had flashed up on the screen there. So as part of that, I understand the point because it's cropped up in other developments and I know the point that's being made. I don't think there's something that we would have an issue with securing as part of an approved landscaping scheme.
Thank you. And my other question does relate to the landscape master plan on slide 9, which doesn't appear to differentiate between pedestrian paths and cycle shared paths. They're all the line of red dots, and the blue existing public footpath. I think you mentioned earlier that part of that was going to be upgraded to a bridleway so you could use cycles on it or something, and there doesn't seem to be any difference on that master plan. Is that a problem, or will that be secured in your detailed landscaping thingy you've just mentioned?
I think that the landscape master plan is showing a general concept of how the landscaping would be treated, and on top of that shows connectivity through the site and the way you could travel through the site using non-car modes, which is the indication that's shown on the dots. Again, with the details that would be secured through landscaping addition, we can look at the details of how that works, but the general formation of movements across the site would be as shown on that plan.
And because the cycle routes are shown on that sort of concept plan with the purple lines on or whatever, I think, was it called the concept connectivity plan that we shared with the other one? Presumably the ones that are shown there as cycle routes will be cycle routes, despite the fact they all look the same on here.
Apologies, I misunderstood. Yes, that is the case. I mean, in terms of what we're trying to achieve here is a synergy across the two sites for cycles and cyclists and pedestrians, and there'll be an upgrade of that network to bridleway status in order to make sure that they're all fully usable by cyclists as well as pedestrians.
Councillor Willen, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that feeds neatly onto my next question, which is at the corner of the site by Upland Court, where there is a cycle route or a route that's going to be upgraded to bridleway and links onto the existing track that previously went up to the chicken sheds. Is there any work to be done to upgrade that private track? I mean, I don't know if it would be possible to do that, but it probably isn't suitable for cyclists at present. So is there any proposal to do that one way or another, whether it's through section 106 or by the developer doing some work there. And my other question is relating to the emergency access. What is to prevent a vehicle using that, if it can be used by, the understanding I had was it can be used by cycle, so it will be perhaps 2.5 metres wide, but if there is not to be a barrier, then what's to prevent a vehicle just driving along there?
On the, excuse me, on the first point, I think the track you're referring to, Councillor, is this one here, where it comes
From that
out.
point on, where your dot is now, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the way the site is arranged, there's the attenuation basin, and next to that you've got the track, which basically is the line of the public right-of-way, which is not being altered. In terms of the treatment of that, the landscaping of that will be dealt with through the condition, but that would need the agreement of the public rights-of-way team as well, of course, because it is a public right-of-way. So they would be the final arbiter, I think, of how that particular track is treated. But it's certainly shown as being provided next to the open space there.
And to what standard is that? That bit you've just run your red dot? Yeah, that is that 2.5 metres wide so that it can be used by cyclists? Or is it just going to be a public footpath?
Well, if it's to be used by, the intention is it to be used by cyclists and pedestrians, so the width of that would have to be appropriate to that use. And there is sufficient room within the site in order to provide that width, because it's adjacent to the attenuation basin. So it wouldn't actually be enclosed by development as such. So that would be good. With regard to the emergency access, my understanding is that a bollard would be in place to stop vehicles going in and out at that point. There would be a bollard to actually restrict vehicles, but obviously cyclists could pass by.
A single bollard, I mean, what's to prevent a motorcycle using it?
There is nothing physically to prevent a motorcycle. But if you put it in measures to prevent a motorcycle, there's a risk that could also prevent cyclists, because they're a similar width. So it's difficult to prevent.
Thank you.
Okay, right, so we're going to move on now then to the ward, sorry, let me just check, there's nothing else, is there? Thanks. Yes, so we're going to move on. We've got no one from the Town Council, no objection, no support. We're now going to move on to the agent. We've got Daniel Fletcher and Raymond Long. So we hand over to you. Again, 3 minutes, please. And we've got a timer here. Thanks very much. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to correct, it's David Fletcher. I've got Daniel Wilson, which might have been the confusion, but yeah, apologies. Yeah, the proposals before you today have been subject to detailed discussions both prior to and following the submission of the planning application with your officers. In particular, we'd like to thank officers over the last couple of months for their work in facilitating close discussions between us and the developers of the adjacent site, Ashes Farm, as you've heard this morning, and to ensure a coordinated approach with the two applications going to committee on the same day. We've also undertaken detailed engagement with key consultees such as the Highway Authority and the lead local flood authority. As you've heard earlier, we've worked very closely with the site next door, and we're collectively contributing towards the provisions for junction improvements along the B1115 and the A1120 junction, contribution towards bus services and improvements to the bus stop adjacent to the site. We've also given very careful consideration towards improvements to cycle and pedestrian connectivity, again, as you've heard from your officers. Vehicular access, I know you've already discussed, has also been considered carefully. The land in that corner of the site is outside of our control, but we've chosen a location for the site to provide the best visibility displays in and out of the site and a suitable staggered junction from the junction to the south. As set out in your officer's report, the proposed density of the site is relatively modest for this location at 28 dwellings per hectare. The proposed number of dwellings on this site and the adjacent site fully accord with the detailed development brief that was prepared by your council, and it also accords with the proposed number of units allocated for the overall site within the emerging local plan. The design and layout of the scheme has also been subject to extensive engagement, and the proposed design and layout has sought to respond to this development brief for the site. They provide a good mix of market and affordable housing, with affordable dwellings pepper-potted throughout the site. The locations of the open space within the site have also been carefully considered to provide good access for residents throughout the site and also provide important visual nodes along the primary street within the development. The applicants fully recognise the climate change emergency, and a number of proposals are proposed to maximise energy efficiency of the development. First and foremost, this includes a fabric-first approach to the development and exemplary use of seeking to minimise energy use of the dwellings. And as you've heard, there's provision of air source heat pumps, which overall provides a scheme that's in excess of the policy requirements. Overall, the proposals are considered to fully accord with your local plan, and we believe there are no technical reasons why planning permission should not be granted today. I'm accompanied here today by specialist transport, sustainability consultants, as well as a member from the applicants team, so very happy to answer any questions members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've probably got several questions. So could you just confirm, if I can kick off, that's right. Can you just confirm, in terms of the affordable housing along the A14, how will those on the top floor flats, they'll be looking straight out at the highways passing, the traffic passing 24/7. So how will they be able to ventilate their properties so that they can have passing air through the bedrooms?
So I believe we've got the option for obviously sort of mechanical ventilation if we need it, but also the ability for residents to open their windows. As we've heard, we've got as part of the proposal provision for an acoustic fence along the north boundary of the site to minimise noise from the A14.
Is the acoustic fence not lower than the windows of the top floor flats?
Yeah, I believe it's slightly lower than the windows in the top floor flats. Yeah, I believe that is correct.
Okay, so can I move on to triple parking? Looking at the map, you've got a large number of triple parking right next to the visitor bays, which means what happens on all the sites that you will be very familiar with, it always happens, including your sites, that people then go and park in the visitor parking because they don't triple park, which means actually the 66 visitor parking will be less than 30 if people start taking that option. So what would you propose as the best solution? Isn't it to remove triple parking?
I think, parking is always, I think, a difficult issue with any site. So as you've heard, we have got provision for some triple parking within the site, predominantly to meet the needs of the larger four-bedroom dwellings. We would hope and you'd think that a lot of those four-bedroom dwellings won't have free cars associated with them. And secondly, I think there will be occasions when visitors will triple park because they're visiting a house where they've got that existing parking provision. I think obviously overall our proposals fully accord with the car parking standards, which is obviously what we've been working closely with officers and the Highway Authority on.
Can I just ask a follow-up then? So other developers have come here and withdrawn all their triple parking. Would you do the same on this site?
That's not something that we're looking to consider to do at this point in time. I think from our point of view, we have met with the local authority, we met with the county council, and our highways consultant is here, and they recommended that we follow the parking guidance that is prescribed by the local authority, and we've been very clear that we have a accorded with that guidance.
I accept that. It's just other developers have come in, withdrawn all their triple parking, so I just want to know if you were up to it. But that's your call. I totally accept that, and you've met the parking guideline. Can I just ask about solar panels on the roofs? So can you just clarify who and how people can get that, and how many houses will or properties will get that?
The proposal at the moment is that there aren't any, or they're going over and above what actually is required here. We're meeting the planning policy. We are 20% over the carbon emissions from building regulations. That's the proposal, and do not need PV panels at the moment to achieve that in our energy strategy.
So you're not proposing PV panels throughout?
Not at the moment, and if they are required, then they will. Obviously, we're looking then at suitable orientations. That nothing is.
Sorry, required. Could you just explain? Required by who?
So I think if there are building regulations requirement, then that's something that we'd have to accord with at that point in time. If the regulations change, as things stand, we are providing above the policy requirement in terms of energy, and that's something that we have put forward today in terms of the presentation. I know a lot of the members have questions about the two areas in terms of the brown area and the purple area, in terms of that was put forward on the screen earlier by Brad. And we just want to be very clear that we're going above the policy requirement when it comes to energy, and that's why we have committed as a developer to the area in purple. That's what we are going to be delivering in terms of air source heat pumps, and that's above the policy, and therefore the area that is in, so the area in brown is what we've committed to. The area in purple is something that we will look at potentially delivering depending on if regulations change at that point in time, and also the supply chain.
I accept what you say, and I'm afraid I'm going to say the same thing. We've had other developers who've come in here and said they're going to do the whole thing with air source heat pumps to be way above minimum policy. So it's just, we just need to get that clarity. We meet every 2 weeks, and we have developers in here every 2 weeks. Okay, open it up to other members who want to follow up further questions. Councillor Morley, you're first.
The areas that, I think it was 155 odd houses that aren't designated for heat pumps, will the occupants or the purchasers have the ability to specify heat pumps in those properties?
I didn't hear the question clearly. I'm not sure if you want to repeat, ma'am or chair.
For the 155 houses that are not designated for heat pumps, do the purchasers, potential purchasers, have the option of specifying that they would like heat pumps?
Not at this point in time. Not at this point in time. I think how we're looking at it is that there are very specified rules and regulations in terms of policies and building regulations in terms of what we are required to do. In our point of view, we've gone above that, recognizing that there is a climate emergency, and we have chosen as a business to deliver I think it's in excess of 20% of air source heat pumps on the site to provide that for future residents. So those have been decided that, it's been decided that that will be on the area in brown, and the area in purple is something we will consider in the future. For the remainder of the site, it will be conventional gas.
Councillor Manson.
Thank you. On that point about the conventional gas heated homes, is there, I mean, will there be any sort of, come the time when gas is no longer available, will whatever fittings are in those dwellings be compatible with moving forward in the future, or will that be completely up to the owners to fund any transition to a different heating arrangement, or is it going to be sort of back compatible?
My understanding is that we're building these homes to be adaptable for the future, and as and when those regulations come in, then as a developer that's responsible, that we've signed up to the charter and all the rest of that, we will have to ensure that we are according to whatever the rules and regulations are at that point in time. I can't really say what that will be at this stage because we don't know what that is, but our intention is to accord with that when that comes into place.
Can I just come back on that? So when the purchaser buys the property, yeah, they can use gas heating. I was thinking about when it comes to the time that they have to completely refit their heating, that cost will be all down to them. Your system will be defunct, whatever you've put in there, because you're only working to what is required now.
I'm not really sure if I can answer that in fuller detail, because we will have to accord with whatever the regulations state at the point in time. So I think there is a charter that is being considered by government now in terms of when it's no longer relevant to have gas, that developers potentially will be contributing to that happening at that point in time. But the details of that are still to be determined. So we can't sit here at this point in time and commit to that until we know what the rules and regulations are. But what I can say is that whenever the rules and regulations change, we will be complying with that.
Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two different questions. One is, leading on from the discussion about air source heating, if PV panels or air source heating are requested by a purchaser, would there be a need to alter the internal layout to accommodate the kit that's needed? Or can it just be, would it just be a straightforward, we'll take that room out and it will be the housing for the heating system? Or will you need to have a different layout for that particular house?
If with the installation of PV panels also, you can retrofit that. Yeah, so it's something an occupier can do on their own free will if they choose to do so in the future. And you would need an inverter for that, and then it's possible to retrofit that. Yeah, not a problem.
Chair, I understand that. The question really is, perhaps I can ask it in a different way. If you've got one of the houses that has air source heating provided, do you have a similar layout house but without air source heating, or is it a particular layout of the house because it has air source heating?
No. It's a similar layout, to answer your question.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. The other question is I'm returning to the pedestrian refuge. So it's a question for the highway engineer. If there are platoons of cyclists coming up the cycle track, which we know they are, and pedestrians and people with prams and so on, because that's a very busy cycle track that you're going to have to cross, is it possible to redesign the junction with a larger pedestrian refuge to accommodate, say, 6 or 8 people who are got halfway across the junction and have to wait before they get the second option? I fear that without that, it's an accident waiting to happen. People are going to be part way across, and the island's not going to be big enough for them.
Thank you for your question. The designs that you've seen on the slides presented by Mr. Heffer have been updated, and the island has got a little bit bigger than what's been presented. The idea is that if the button is pressed on the side, that it is a straight across crossing. It is not a point where you would stop halfway. There is a refuge island in there to enable a pole to be mounted. The idea is that people would walk across the entire length or width of Stow Upland Road in one go.
No, this is sorry, perhaps I wasn't clear. It's where it's your main spine road out. Is there isn't a crossing of any sort other than drop curbs, are there, across there?
No, there is. It's a controlled toucan crossing
in between the spine road.
In between the spine road that's being presented for the access and the existing Stow Upland Road, which is the estate road on the opposite side.
No, I think you still misunderstood, or I have.
Do you mean across the bell mouth of the access?
I'm talking about across the bell mouth of the access.
Right, I see what you mean. So that is designed in accordance with the relevant design manual for roads and bridges and accommodates cyclist width. This is obviously a full application, and that design has been presented and is suitable for that amount of people that can be crossing at that point is the right width, and that's in exact accordance with the relevant design standards for an access.
I understand that, but so what is the right amount of people then? You said it's big enough for the right amount of people. Is the right amount of people 10, 16, 2, 1?
I appreciate it. Obviously, we can't exactly know how many people will cross at any one point on every single day, can we? So it's a case of that is in accordance with the design standards presented, and Highways have approved that design approach. It will be road safety audited and go through the relevant Section 278 design approval process. So it will be checked again at that detailed design stage and independently road safety audited. So at that point, should the auditor, who is a professional in that area, decide that that island needs to be a little bit bigger than what's been presented currently, at that point it will then be redesigned to meet those requirements.
And you think that will come up at stage 1 safety audit?
No, stage 2. Stage 1 has been assessed and it wasn't brought up at that stage.
But you had counts of pedestrian, you had a pedestrian count when you designed that. You knew how many pedestrians are likely to be going along there.
No, we did not undertake a pedestrian count as we were not required at that time.
But you might be for stage 2.
If that's what was requested by the Highway Authority and the road safety audit person that would be undertaking that assessment at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor May.
Sorry, Chair, it was dealt with by...
Any other questions at all? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the ward members. Should I do it as last time, go first on behalf of Councillor Moore?
I'll have to go first.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, thank you. As with the previous application, we actually did have objections from the town council, which are in the notes. And being substitutes, I'm not sure if you had time to read through this. The objection from the town council is a lengthy one. I'm not going to read through it, but it's still very valid. We have heard from a developer that they have met with us. Yes, met with us, took away what we said, changed the name in pencil and gave us back the same application. None of this will actually meet recommendations from the town council. It is not fitting with what the town needs. There's mention about the density, if they have concerns about density from the town council. We've mentioned again before, Anglian Water have said very okay that, well, what Anglian Water say, obviously we have to take their word for it, but there's concerns there. There's concerns regarding the access. Yes, we have heard that this is not in the developer's hands. We haven't seen the conversations between who owns that access that could be made a safer access onto the roundabout. We're not sure, we don't know what has gone on between here, but we know that this would be a better access, but it's not on the plans. It's not looked at because it's not owned. The site layout, we had the earlier site layouts with a green area in the centre, which would have been more beneficial. Seeing it from a road access, you wouldn't have had a just face onto houses. It would have had more. It would have more screening. It would have had more community feeling, but we've lost that. So we've gone site the issues with climate change. Yes, we have the air source heat pumps. I like those. That is good. That's one good thing about it. But from what we've heard now, there's less commitment to actually have purple. It's if this changes. Wouldn't it be better to have right now commitment that we would in both areas, where we are actually looking for meeting the climate crisis, where we have other developments doing further. We have the town council has mentioned about the 22%, achievement targets, yes. Local services, issues regard buses, well, bus stop, brilliant. Again, we've already heard from the bus communities, these buses will not be provided. So we're going to have a bus stop which will not be provided. It will have a bus stop with no bus to come to it. It would be nice to look at, just like other developments we have in the area where we have bus stops not being serviced. So we've had lovely engagement where not being listened to. We've had not feeling that it's got any commitment to actually meet with the area with what actually could be integrated into the area. We're resigned that house is going to be there, but could be done better. So I don't have to mention about the lack of amenities. That's not up today. I don't have to mention what I've already mentioned, but the Town Council have given a lengthy objection. The Town Council has not been listened to remotely regarding the application of this. And as a ward member, I have to second with what the Town Council have recommended. Are we getting what is best for the area? Are we getting the best housing layout? Even if we have looked at, and I do have a concern as a resident of a council house, having these areas where we would be looking at the A14. Yes, we've looked at the sound, but have we looked at sound from that height? The sound does change from there, and we will have able to access open windows, but the air quality coming from the A14 into these windows, we have the option of opening a window and breathing exhaust fumes, or having a window closed. So, all in all, there's some things I like, but it's not going far enough. This isn't an outline thing. This is a black and white. This is what we all get. This is a wishy-washy going, we may look at it if policies change, but we need to be looking for the future. We need to be looking for residents. And are we going far enough? And I have to argue that this is not the best. This is not the best plan for what we could get. This is not what we should be looking at now.
Thank you very much. I'll just read out Councillor Muller's comments and take if anyone has any questions at the end. Many of my concerns with this application are the same as my concerns with the previous application. I agree with the comments made by Stowmarket Town Council, who object to the application. Engagement by the applicant has been poor and could have been a lot better. The minor amendments made by the applicant with regards to housing units and parking fail to address the substantive issues raised previously in respect to poor access to the site, prominence of public amenity space, poor design of the buildings and lack of architectural merit of the scheme. Of particular concern is the possible disturbance of the surface of the former chicken farm, which could release stored carbon into the atmosphere. Tree planting should be strengthened to offset the carbon footprint when developing the site. I fully support a proposed condition regarding this part of the site. Residents are very concerned about the increase in traffic along Stow Upland Road and Newton Road. It would have been better if the access to the site would have come off the roundabout located at the top of Stow Upland Road. However, I understand a covenant prevents this. The proposed access halfway up Stow Upland Road is unsatisfactory. The shared foot cycleway on the west of Stow Upland Road will be significantly inhibited by the creation of the new access halfway down the hill. The cycle connection at the southern end is welcomed, but a connection to the north end needs improving. I do not support the proposed toucan crossing. The allowance for parking is inadequate. There does not appear to be good sight lines between the many homes and their allocated parking spaces, which would potentially lead to a high level of on-street parking, as many parking spaces may be deemed unsafe. Any triple-deck parking should be avoided. I'd like to see the use of air source heat pumps, electric vehicle charging points, and solar panels considered where possible, bearing in mind the climate emergency we're currently facing. A construction management plan is also essential, and please refer to my comments on the adjoining Ashes Farm development. And I am unable to support this application. So that's from the ward members. Yes, Councillor Mansell, do you have a question for the ward member that's here?
I do have a question because Councillor Muller's words mentioned some covenant that prevented access to the roundabout, and I just wondered if the planning officer could enlighten us a bit about whether there, or the highways
I think
officer.
Philip's waved his hand. I think you can come in.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm not sure the planning officer, I think Bradley answered that question sort of, but actually I would be inclined to ask the applicants to answer that one, because they probably know better than we do.
Am I allowed to ask the applicant that one about the covenant preventing access by the round?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that at this particular juncture, but I'd happy to go away and come back and confirm. I don't have it right here, right now, sorry.
Any other questions for the ward member? No. Okay, so that's it, folks. We've had all the information put before us. It's for us to discuss, debate, and come to a conclusion. Councillor Mansell, first up.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I fully appreciate that we're going to get housing on this site, it's an allocated site, I don't like this design of this development. There are lots of things that are inadequate or just meet requirements. You know, it ticks all the boxes, it's meeting policy, but I would like something better. I'm baffled as to why you'd want to put a 3-storey building adjacent to the A14 where the fence isn't going to go high enough, because those people who live on the top floor, if they do open their windows, they're going to get a load of fumes, a load of noise, and it just seems, and it's at the top of the hill, so it's going to be really prominent. I just think that's an odd place to put a 3-storey building. I'm not sure if there was anything about air quality assessments either in the report. I'm sorry if there was and I missed it. There are a significant number of instances of triple parking, and I think Mid-Suffolk planning committees are becoming a bit notorious on having a good old moan about triple parking. And we've already heard that in the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, this site and the adjacent site that we've just been contemplating earlier this morning had an allocation of 400. I know that's gone up, but it's now at whatever it was, 500 and something in total over the whole site. So maybe it might be better to have slightly fewer on this site, and therefore we could get rid of the instance of triple parking and put a little bit more space around, so there was room for non-triple parking, and still meet or exceed, would be even better, the parking standards. I think whatever it was, the map with the brown and the purple things about the air source heat pumps. Okay, so it exceeds the 20% requirement for carbon-free heating systems. But again, it's like a sort of sop to let's tick the box. We've done it. We've got our requirement of air source heat pumps. You know, why not offer it to prospective purchasers as an option on all the other dwellings? Let them decide whether they want to buy a house which currently has a gas boiler and they know they're going to have to fork out some money in future to convert it to a more 21st century form of heating. Yeah, and I'm also a bit concerned about this access point. I would like to know more about whether how much exploratory work has been done about making the access off that roundabout. It would make so much more sense to have the access on a roundabout. That cycle path beside Stowmarket Road is quite a steep hill for Suffolk. I know it's not much of a hill if you're used to cycling in the mountainous parts of the country, but for Suffolk it's a big hill, and if you're going down the hill, you'll be going a good old lick down that hill, and now you've got to stop halfway down for the access point. If you're coming up the hill, you're going to lose momentum every time you get to that junction. And you're right, I think the points that were made by Councillor Wellham about the number of people who use that route. There is extensive developments going on up the hill in Stowmarket, and this is the most convenient route for those people to walk or cycle from the developments in Stowmarket down to the station and the centre of town. It is a busy cycleway, and we're now making it more difficult for people to use. The fact that design of the crossing of the access road hasn't taken into account the fact that there is a large volume of pedestrians and cyclists on that path. I think more could have been done there. So I'm sorry, but I can't support this. I think improvements could be made to this development to make it more acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Woodboys.
I think at this point I must support these arguments. I have two ideas here which are in conflict and they shouldn't be. The first idea is about we're responsible for creating the best possible designed spaces for our present and future communities. And the second is my attitude towards building regulations is that building regulations are about a minimum requirement and not a ceiling on what is possible. At the very least in this situation, I think for future occupants of these houses, that's probably going to be the most important purchase they make in their lives. And they should have the opportunity to future-proof that purchase as much as possible. So they should have the opportunity to adopt new technology that will allow for that. My second concern is the egress of the spinal road onto the B115. I'm not sure whether the Toucan crossing is a solution. When we were discussing crossings further along at Stotland, there were huge concerns raised about tailbacks from such a crossing. That is a busy road. I think there should be more sensitivity towards the current users of that road. And I think the egress off the new development on Spinal Road needs to be thought out. The covenant that appears to be preventing access onto the roundabout, I think should have been or could have been explored in more detail before the possibility of exiting onto the roundabout was dismissed. So I'm not feeling very confident about supporting this as the best development on this site.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak or I'll come in? Yeah, Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much. A few things. Joining on to the roundabout, for me, is a bit of a worry because I think you then create a really easy route down to Berry Road on the other side, a cut-through, and I don't think that road's suitable for a cut-through. Okay, not being on the roundabout doesn't stop it from happening, but it doesn't make it quite such an obvious direction to go in. Yeah, the layout of this is... There's a lot of things I don't like about it. I don't like the XXX parking. I don't like to see affordable houses on the side of the A14. It's one of the few houses where you don't get a choice whether you live there or not. You're put in probably the worst position on the whole site. I've seen lots of these applications though that are similar. I don't think that's a good enough reason to say no to this application. I don't think that would stand up and appeal. But it's not nice to see. This land contamination issue that I talked about earlier in questions, I think the potential contamination of this site, being an ex-livestock farm and potentially storing manure on site for years and years, means that there's a risk to water quality in groundwater becoming polluted. And I don't feel like at the moment we've done enough to make sure that risk isn't there before as an authority. A condition I'd like to see is that we have much more relevant assessment of the soil contamination risk on the site before the planning's agreed. We're talking about Anglia Water connecting to the sites and the potential of effluent going out when they haven't got capacity. But having the groundwater with phosphates in is going to be much of a much bigger pollution risk than that connection. So for me, I think that would be quite important. But I'd like to also see the commitment to off-plan houses being offered air source or whatever low carbon heat, something away from gas. I think the ones being built with gas boilers, all the radiators, as far as I understand, all the radiators would have to be changed when they went over to air source heat pumps, which the pipes might be in the right place, but it's going to be a big cost, and it's a cost that will definitely have to be paid by the people buying them, because they won't be able to carry on with the gas thing. So for me, there's lots of bits in here that I don't like, but I haven't really, I'll listen to debate, and unless I hear something that I think is something we could really take to appeal and stand by, I think I'd be voting for this.
Philip, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, it has occurred to me when the poultry question was mentioned earlier, that it would be possible to include that if you, on page 201, fourth bullet up from in the list of conditions, that basically looks at gas contamination from ground gases, and I would say you'd include for analysis of former poultry uses. So, accepting that there is a former chicken site here, I would say that that's certainly within scope to amend a condition over if members chose to go down that route. And clearly there's a lot of debate around that. Councillor Mansfield talked about the possibility of cyclists herring down the hill, I think. And I'll go again with my own experience of cycling both up it and down it. If you look on page 307, you've got a fairly clear impression of where the access point lies relative to gradients, because the contours are shown. My own instinct is you're not quite at the point where you achieved escape velocity. And you certainly won't be doing that on the way up the hill. Page 306, page 307, you have two plans of the access point with the contour. And I don't know, Brad, if you've got the development brief, but the development brief, and getting back to the roundabout, and I don't know who owns that piece of land, it seems to me you're looking at what I would classically call a ransom strip, frankly. And the development brief itself acknowledged that wasn't going to be an access point, and I don't know, Brad, it's sitting in the papers, isn't it? What am I doing? I should direct you to the papers on page 301. There are two big red arrows which indicate the access points into this allocation. That's not an application plan, that's the development brief. So it was always expected that somewhere up this hill there would be an entrance route into the site. And obviously, that's a concept plan, it doesn't tell you any of the detail. And what you have is a little further downhill, but it's still the same concept, I guess, in terms of entry and access. I think for the moment, Chair, I'll leave it there. We've obviously been here before at committee, and we've had deferrals to negotiate whether developers are willing to increase the content of renewables within their schemes. I'm listening to the debate, Chairman.
That was going to be my next question for you, is we've been in this position before, where we've been discussing, and we're all saying the same things pretty much on design. We're not happy with the overall design, some of the layout isn't right, inadequate parking, although just meeting the standards, I accept that, not quite up to the environmental credentials that we expect in Mid-Suffolk. We expect, I think probably would be fair to say, more than this. And so, what we've done in the past is we've asked it to be deferred for officers to go away and try and push the developer, in this case Crest Nicholson, to come back with a better plan. Quite frankly, that's the way I feel now already, but I'm very happy for others to come in and make a proposal on what you feel we should do. Or if you want to just go to a yes, no, of course, that's also your decision. So, Councillor Mayor, you were next, and then Councillor Wellham.
Thanks, Chair. I support your position. I'm not going to go over all of the sustainability, access issues that have already been discussed. For me, it all comes down to design. Is this design good enough? Or turning that on its head, is this design poor enough for us to reject this application? And I sit between the two. So I think a deferral route is fair to all. I don't believe 37 triple parking spaces is good enough, even if it meets the minimum standard. Yeah, I would support your recommendation or suggestion. I will propose a defer on the basis that officers go away and try and improve the design.
Councillor Wellham, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. That gives me the opportunity to second that proposal, which I'm pleased to do. Just a couple of points that I would make. Perhaps to look at if the deferral is successful. Like a number of others, I don't understand the reason for the Toucan crossing. There is a Toucan crossing just to the north side of the roundabout, and I don't understand why one is proposed for that particular location. If one is required somewhere on the sort of south side, then is that where it needs to be? I don't think so. The other thing, I'm concerned about the houses and the flats that are so close to the A14, particularly around ventilation for the top floor of the flats. The other thing that I am also concerned about is that if people were to look at page 299, it shows the edge of Stow Upland as it was, not as it is, but as it was. Can we get that up on the screen at all, please? It's a different... Slide 5. It's slide 5. That note, well, it's page 299. It's the one that shows... Slide 5. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, thank you. There we can see the edge of Stow Upland as it was, and we can see the A14, and we can see a gap between Thorny Green Road and the A14, and it was anticipated that those fields there, that gap would remain, and there'd be no sort of bringing together of Stow Upland and Stowmarket, because there would be a green space there. Unfortunately, those fields are now being built on. Permission was given for development on those fields, and one of the reasons that it was thought to be acceptable was because the green space could be retained on the south side. In other words, the area where the flats are proposed and so on was to remain as a green space to protect the gap between Stow Upland and Stowmarket. So we've lost it on the north side. We're now looking to lose it on the south side. So basically, all there is between developments on the two sides is the A14 bridge. So that's not a good thing. I think there should be, the developed area should be moved away from the A14, particularly around the roundabout and where the flats are. And I think that's something I would like to be looked at as part of the further work if the deferment is agreed. Thank you.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is go to a vote then on the proposal of deferral.
Chairman,
yes.
can I please ask, if you're going to ask me to negotiate something, I do need a little more certainty around it.
Yeah, so I think the design and layout is self-explanatory around the design with the two-storey properties overlooking the A14, so that the residents there in the affordable housing, when they open their windows, are looking out straight onto the highway, and the impact that might have. Well, there's 2 and 3. There's both. So the layout of therefore the layout of the site. I've got inadequate parking has come up, and we know from our experience what happens in sites where we have triple parking. Poor environmental credentials, I would say. You know, we're doing the minimum, but we like to think that to be proud of our sites in mid-Suffolk, so can we go further than just getting over the basic line? We've then talked about the transport and the points that Councillor Caston's made around the chickens and the impact of that, and then around the highways cycle concerns that have brought up. I think that those are the main things.
And whether or not the toucan is an asset or whether it's just another disruption to flow of traffic.
And I would ask, I know the clock's always ticking on these things. We're very happy for it to come back in, 4 weeks. As soon as I know there's work pressures on Bradley, but we don't want this to delay your application. We just feel we could give it a better shot. Are you happy with that, Philip?
Just trying to capture it, Chairman. So I've got good design and layout aspects, including 2- and 3-storey proposed units adjacent to the A14, adequacy of parking, including removal of triple parking, potential for purchase of PV, air source heat pump, other improvements above minimum standards. And then I was typing whilst you were talking, Chairman, and I missed the tail end of what you were suggesting as a shopping list of items to discuss.
We've had discussions around the impact of the cycling, so just to come back and make sure what's being said is accurate, we're 100% comfortable with, and then the toucan crossing was the other point.
Chair, the pedestrian refuge on the junction. Yeah, that was to do with the cycling.
Yeah, please.
So, Chairman, I clearly need the seconders agreement, but defer for officers to negotiate good design and layout aspects, including 2- and 3-storey proposed units adjacent to the A14, adequacy of parking, including removal of triple parking, potential for purchaser, PV, air source heat pump, other improvements above minimum standards, cycle and refuge consideration, and toucan crossing appropriateness, and for officers to report back to committee.
That's been proposed by Councillor Mayor and seconded by Councillor Wellham. Are you both happy with that? Yeah, okay, so on that basis we'll go to a vote, please.
Thank you, members. That vote has now been updated and is in progress. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 6 votes for deferral. Councillor Morley has left the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so final item on the agenda is site inspections. Do we have any site inspection requests that need to be reported to committee?
None received, Chair.
Okay, so I close the meeting at 12:50. Thank you very much, everyone.